Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and happy week 11, everyone. We got 15 games to break down. And as always, to accomplish this task, I am joined by none other than PFF senior analyst Dwain "The Rock" McFarland, who's award-winning, critic-winning, everyone loves it utilization report you can find at pff.com. I was starting off on the right track there, Dwain, and I lost it halfway through.
Award-winning and also has a lot of critics, yes.
I was like, I'm not sure what awards, but hey, man, that's all you got to say. My apartment complex out front, there's a sign that just says, "We're number one." Doesn't specify what magazine said that, doesn't specify what they're number one in, but hey, you throw it out there, man, people are going to believe it.
I like it. I'll roll with it. Yeah, man, I'm excited for the week. I cannot believe we're in week 11. Really 2 weeks probably left for most people listening, to figure out how they're getting their team into the playoffs or solidifying their playoff team that they already have. So yeah, man, let's jump in.
Grind time, great day. To be great as always. We'll start things off with Thursday Night Football. Patriots at the Falcons. New England sitting as a 7-point favorite now, opened at 1.5. We saw some really big jumps this week from the opening line to where things are settling right now. Something to keep an eye on as the week continues to progress. Game total sitting at 47.5. We need to keep an eye on this backfield. As always, Dwain and I do a waiver wire podcast that you can find as the Tuesday edition each and every week. We really broke down what Ramondre Stevenson was bringing this week, but that was pretty much under the assumption that Damien Harris, who started out the week with the DNP, wasn't going to be suiting up. He was out there in a limited capacity on Tuesday, so it does appear that Damien is progressing through the concussion protocol. And I mean, if we learned anything last week, it's that the Patriots don't mind putting these guys out there even after clearing their concussion protocol if they haven't been practicing. So Stevenson, yeah, if Harris is out of the picture, we can treat him as a top 20, maybe even top 15 running back with the added upside we get from the passing game that he has and Damien Harris really doesn't. But Dwain, I mean, if Harris is going to be back in the picture, I don't think he lost his job based on one down week where he was concussed against the freaking Jets. So at that point, I probably would be back to ranking Harris higher. Now, when you have Harris and Stevenson there, they are going to eat into each other's workload a little bit. It's not as big of a slam dunk than usual, but hey, Damien Harris, low-end RB2 of Stevenson. I mean, if he's able to suit up. Stevenson, more of a mid-tier RB2 if Harris is going to be sidelined. I would really try to avoid starting Stevenson if Harris is going to be active. I think you'll probably flirt with 10 to 12 carries and targets, not the end of the world, but we are not getting those 25 combined opportunities that we saw last week. Only other major notes with the Patriots, Hunter Henry again gets a boost in the low-end tight end 1 territory if Jonnu Smith is going to remain sidelined with that shoulder injury. We can live with I should say this, we can't live with 2 tight end rotations in fantasy football lane. When you take one of those guys away, opens up a lot of room for the remaining player. Final note is with these wide receivers, really only Jacoby Myers, and it's not even more so about his target share, which it is the best on the Patriots and everything, but more so I think this matchup. We do have the Falcons sitting as a bottom 10 defense in fantasy points per game to the position. Only the Browns and the Lions have actually allowed higher QB ratings to targets aligned out of the slot. Just more of a storyline here, Dwain, but we saw Jacoby break that touchdown streak and everything, and it kind of reminded me, and these are not the same player. Please don't, confuse me comparing Jacoby Myers to Julio Jones. But Julio had that real long scoreless stretch a couple years ago, and then he scores against Washington. And then all of a sudden it was 6-7 straight games where he kept ripping off touchdowns. So just saying, just because Jacoby scored once doesn't mean he's going to go back to never scoring again for the next 3 years. Don't be surprised if we see, back-to-back boom weeks for Jacoby Myers, because as great as A.J. Terrell is, only Jalen Ramsey graded higher this year. He sticks to his spot at left cornerback. So when we have someone like Myers working mostly out of the middle of the field, I think he does warrant, arguably upside wide receiver 3 treatment in this spot. So feeling good about Jacoby. Hunter Henry if Jonnu's out. Keep an eye on those running backs, but if Damien Harris is in, low-end RB2 if he's out. Feeling especially confident about Ramondre Stevenson. Dwain, a lot of injuries in this game just to worry about, man, which is unfortunate starting the week. But maybe, just maybe, our king, Cordero Patterson, could be playing through this high ankle sprain. He was limited during Tuesday's practice.
Yeah. Patterson doesn't want to give up the season, Ian. He's like, this is my time. I love it. I'm going to be out here put a shot in it. Like, let's just rock. In all seriousness though, like with Patterson, and I'll be interested to get your take here. Like these high ankle sprains, man, I pretty much steer clear of them. I know it's mild, but trying to come back one game in historically, like that hasn't been a recipe for success. It usually equals, limited carries or a potential tweak in the game. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a physical therapist. So like, I'm not the expert, but just reading what everybody else has put out there. And we have a lot of really good people in the space. So man, it's amazing how much that part of our industry has grown in the last 5 years. Like there's so much good stuff going on there. So when I look at Patterson, it's going to be hard for me to, even if he plays, like he won't be in my top 24 backs, so I'll put him in my, RB3s, right? Basically, once you start to get into some of the other backs where it could be hit or miss anyway, well, then it's like, okay, fine, I'll go with Cordarrelle Patterson, but we have some names that we'll be getting back this week, potentially like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, some other folks. So we'll have to kind of look at it and see what it looks like as we get closer to Thursday. But for now, I really want to kind of try to still steer clear of Cordarrelle Patterson if I can. Obviously, if it's something where you don't have another option, you'll be happy that he's playing and you'll just hope like in a PPR, maybe you get 10, 15 points out of him, but just don't expect him to be the same. Matt Ryan is kind of turned into like this, boom bust quarterback every week, Ian. But I think it's just really hard to boom if you're going to have Patterson potentially not able to line up out wide and do the normal things he's been doing. And really, we already know Calvin Ridley, is out right now taking care of himself. So that just doesn't leave a lot of options for Matt Ryan. I'd kind of gotten a little bit excited about him, a few weeks ago, just because they were going more vertical down the field. They seemed to be getting into a groove in Arthur Smith's offense. And then you see these two, actually these last 3 weeks are like the perfect example of what you're getting with Matt Ryan lately. You went from quarterback 31 to quarterback 3 to last week quarterback 33. So it's just not something that you can really count on at this point. So I really want to try to keep Matt Ryan away from my lineups. Plus, we know they're playing the Patriots. Bill Belichick does a really good job of figuring out what is the one thing that you have and what should I take away. I think in this case, we all know, Ian, what that one thing, and his name is Kyle Pitts. And Kyle Pitts is an absolute freak. We love him, but the Patriots are very good. They're very notorious for if there's one thing you do well that they have to take away, they will. And here, let's be honest, like Kyle Pitts, he's been getting all the volume we want. Utilization is elite. Like utilization really can't get much better than what you're getting with Kyle Pitts, other than the fact that he has to work outside against quarterbacks, against the top safeties, sees the bracket coverage. When he gets singles, Matt Ryan goes to him. Like if he gets single coverage, Matt Ryan is going to him pretty much like every time. So he's winning those matchups. He's just not getting as much of that, Ian. He's not getting all the single coverage. The other thing that annoys me about Matt Ryan, and honestly this offense a little bit, is like, don't throw him so many contested catches. Like this guy can get open and run after the catch. Like work him inside, get him in there against slot corners, get him in there against the linebackers and safeties. They're just not doing that enough. Now, maybe, Ian, maybe we will get a little bit more of that this week because we did have Hayden Hurst knocked out of the game last week. So if Hurst isn't available, it could just out of necessity. They may move him inside more a little bit than what we've seen, over the past few weeks. So Pitts will be in my top 5. This week, I haven't completely settled on where I'm going to put him. I'll be honest, it's hard to keep him out of the top 3 every week. I know over the last few weeks, he hasn't really performed super well in box scores. I think we had a PPR finish of 10 last week. He's at 5 on the season, but the 2 weeks before, an 18 and a 35. But man, the targets per route run last week, and I think it'll be the same thing this week, Ian. It's a 33% of the time he was in a route, he had a target, 28% target share last week, 28% of the team's air yards. And 57% of his, passes did come on play action. I do like that. I don't know how much respect, really the Falcons run game is going to get, but we know that linebackers are trained, Ian. Doesn't really matter who the running back is. If there is a play action pass and they have a lane that they're supposed to fit, then that's their job. They have to take that step. They have to take that jab step, or they have to look, you know what? I should let the linebacker explain this to folks, like how it works whenever you see play action pass. I'm sure Hartitz, you just went nuts and started making all sorts of racket and like just blitzed the quarterback, and just took him down. But, so Kyle Pitts is really the only option, that you can use from, the Falcons this week. I know we talked about Gallman. We talked about Davis yesterday. If Patterson is inactive, I'm still not excited about these guys, Ian, but I do expect Mike Davis to probably lead in snaps, lead in the passing game, and then I would expect Wayne Gallman to probably get more of the work on the ground. So I expect a committee between the two backs.
When you're taught linebacker from grade school, like you're always first step up and then you react to the pass. That's why throughout my entire baseball and now softball career, I'm a complete liability in the outfield,
In the
when it's
outfield.
supposed to be the opposite. So, yeah, man, I mean, you got to protect that A gap, defend the run. So you just react to the pass. And that's why we see play action, even if you don't have a good running game, still be superior than just straight dropbacks. So I love the point about maybe Pitts getting more pure tight end usage with Hayden Hurst potentially out of the scenario, because that has been where Pitts has thrived this year. His only touchdown of the year was when the Jets guarded him with a defensive lineman near the goal line. And just on a per route basis, I mean, he's averaging 3.04 yards per route run against safeties and linebackers. That's 11th among a sample
great.
with like 140 players. He drops to 87th though when he's going up against cornerbacks. So look, he just turned 21 like 40 days ago. Like, he'll figure this out. The fact he's already been as good as he is, I mean, I think he's more than lived up to the hype. But no, he's not a perfectly polished player yet. Let's try to get him involved more so with what he is doing best. Agree with you on CPAT with the potential for a limited workload. Just a little too much to ask him on a short week of all things to come back from this high ankle sprain.
And I just want to say real quick on New England, if Damian Harris is active, I expect him to be full go. And I have him right now at 18 in my rankings, just based on the news today. It's like, sounds like he's probably going to play. And I agree with you. You can't play Stevenson, but it's a really nice matchup this week for Harris. You guys saw what the Cowboys did on the ground last week against the Falcons. So it's a nice spot. Like, I think he's definitely in the mid-range RB2, conversation. And I would actually say, if for some reason he isn't active, Stevenson will probably be more of a high-end RB2. I know we need to stay on brand with the low-end RB2, Ian, but I'm going mid and high RB2 on those two guys this week, depending on, what their statuses are.
They will throw Stevenson the ball, not so much with Harris. So that's why we get the difference between those guys. Yeah. All right, Ravens at the Bears starting off our Sunday slate. Baltimore sitting at 6.5-point favorites, opened at 3.5. Obviously, Bears coming off a bye. Game total sitting at 45.5. Le'Veon Bell got released, seemingly indicating that Latavius Murray is on his way back sooner rather than later. We'll see, not confirmed by any stretch, but he has now missed quite a bit of time with that ankle injury. I would be a little bit surprised if he's not back this week. If not, though, Devontae Freeman at this point has earned borderline RB2 treatment. I mean, we could even see his role expand further with Le'Veon Bell out of the picture, because Tyson Williams just has been a complete non-factor over the past few weeks, and we saw this backfield condense to just Freeman and Bell. So I would think that Tyson comes in and takes most of the handful of carries and targets that Le'Veon was seeing. But Freeman, not washed, Dwayne. He's actually 10th among 74 backs in PFF rushing grade this year, 10th in yards per carry, tied for 8th in missed tackles forced per carry. And just from watching the games, I think it's fair. He's not his usual 2016, 2017 self, probably never will be again. But credit to Devontae Freeman, proving that he's still got a little bit of gas left in the tank. And if the Ravens are going to feed him 15 combined carries and targets, I do think he's going to warrant something, in that RB 25 to 28 range, I would guess. So maybe more so like a higher end RB3 than a borderline RB2. But it was a couple weeks ago where we could not use anybody in this backfield. I'm cautiously optimistic, if Murray stays out, that Freeman can be that guy, pal. Murray's back. Probably just try to wait a week on this, because without Bell, we could see Tyson get back involved. And when we have a 3-back committee in this offense that's still going overwhelmingly through Lamar, that's when problems happen. But the big storyline from that Thursday night game last week. I have Lamar all over the place. It was very disappointing. We wanted a lot more points coming from both offenses in that one. But if you watched it, you just saw Lamar in this passing game get overwhelmed time and time again by Miami running cover 0. And they actually did so on 19 of Lamar's dropbacks. He has now faced more cover 0 than any other quarterback in the league. And so far, Dwayne, I see why Miami did it. He is not playing very well against it. PFF passing grades 20th among 30 qualified quarterbacks against cover 0. He's 19th in yards per attempt, 28th in QB rating. So really, Dwayne, for me, it's one of these things where we can't quite predict what Chicago is going to do. Are they going to say, hey, this is what has been stopping Lamar, we're going to change our defense to really counteract what has been working against the Ravens? Or are they going to pull a Raiders against the Chiefs and be like, nope, we run what we run, worry about the offense later, and we're going to give up 5 touchdowns to Patrick Mahomes and not run the exact defense that's been giving him problems over the past few weeks. So I think it'll probably be somewhere in the middle. I don't think Lamar and company are going to get shut down like that again, but it is something to keep an eye on, because once they can defeat the cover 0, I think defenses are going to be back into this, okay, how the hell do we stop this group? Because with Hollywood, with Bateman, with Andrews, we got more receivers, and even Duvernay, man, he's been making plays as well. We got pass game options all over the place. It's just a matter of the Ravens trying to solve this one little wrinkle that's been giving them a lot of fits. So obviously we're starting Lamar everywhere. I think Hollywood, even if we need to maybe bump him down a little bit more into that wide receiver 2 territory after Florian wide receiver 1, he should still be started almost everywhere. Bateman, I would say a little bit more of an upside wide receiver 3, with Watkins unfortunately taking a good amount of his snaps and a couple targets. Hopefully they keep flowing. Obviously we love Mark Andrews. So Dwayne, any thoughts on the Ravens? Otherwise, let's just talk about Justin Fields, who, don't look now, but he's been playing some pretty damn good ball over the past few weeks.
Yeah, with Fields, I mean, we've just gotten into a situation where they're finally, Ian, just really letting him use his attributes, right, that help him win. What's made Justin Fields successful? We're finally seeing the Bears coaching staff allow him to utilize those tools. So if you look at the last 2 games, using a lot more play action, getting him more design rushing attempts. He's had 7% and 14% scrambles, 21%, 14%. Sacks are still high. That's worrisome. 10%, 8% sack rate over the last 2 games. That's well above the league averages. You want to be like around, a 6 is kind of bad. Like a really good is like a 5 or a 4. Like you talk about the quick release quarterback. So, so what we need to see from Fields, though, in addition to the rushing, Ian, to really kind of unlock more of the upside. And I do think the receivers are good enough to do this, is whenever he's buying that time and maneuvering around the pocket to also still be able to hit that big play down the field, like what we see with, Lamar Jackson and Hollywood Brown, right? You could have that with Darnell Mooney. Not saying Mooney's as good as Brown, but Mooney's been surprising. Like, he's beating single man coverage. He's getting open. His targets per route runner, actually, they lead the team, right? They're actually ahead of Allen Robinson. And both guys have actually been doing an okay job of, not great getting open, but open enough. Like, I think they do have enough weapons. You have Cole Kmet actually starting to come on a little bit over the last few weeks as well. They're getting him more and more involved into the offense. So yeah, Justin Fields for me this week, he was actually the one that I was struggling, one of my players I was struggling to rank the most. I'm still early in my process, but as far as where exactly I think he should land, I've got him in my 3rd tier. My 3rd tier's got 6 guys in it right now, though. And so it's I really want to get him up closer, to that high-end QB2. Right now I have Tannehill at 12 just because he's been balling out and he's got a great matchup against the Texans. Yeah. But after that, you got Derek Carr, you got Kirk Cousins, you got, Matt Ryan. So it's I'm for sure going to put him over Ryan. Cousins' matchup is kind of tough this week against Green Bay, but it doesn't concern me much because, Cousins has great receivers, so you don't worry about it that much.
Honestly, maybe Carr at this point until we see him prove he can get it going without the field stretcher.
Yeah, and with Carr, though, I just like the matchup and I like the potential. I know the implied points are 24.25 and the total's 49.5 in that game, and we'll get to that in a minute, but I just feel like there is a potential for some shootout there with Cincinnati. But yeah, he's somewhere in there. So he'll either be 13 or 14 probably in my ranks this week for Fields. And honestly, I would have had him higher, but he's just playing against the Ravens, so from a quarterback strength of schedule standpoint, he's going to have a bottom 5 matchup this week. Offensive line pass blocking advantage, probably going to be bottom 7 or 8. So he's still, again, going to be in a matchup where he's going to have to do more of it on his own. Now, I do want to say, this is not the Ravens defense that we've become used to over the course, of the past 3 or 4 years. So while, yeah, it is a tough matchup, it's not like one of these matchups that you just scream and run for the hills. So I feel okay about Fields. I like the way that they're using him. I feel better about the weapons than I have in a while. I don't necessarily want to use any of his passing weapons this week, Ian. I just really want to trust in him. You'll see in my ranks, I'm going to have Mooney. I'll have, Robinson. They're all going to be in wide receiver 4 territory. Wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5. They won't be up into my top 36 receivers. Cole Kmet, though, could get sneaky, because he is seeing enough utilization. And if you look at his, last several games, he's seeing 5-6 targets every single week. He's nice in the seam. It does seem to be the guy that when Fields does step up and he feels the pressure outside and he manages to step up instead of outside in the pocket, he seems to be hitting these seams, right? And can we just, And if you need to make, I know you've got a contractual obligation to anytime we talk about Jimmy Graham, there's something you need to say. But can we just get some of those to Cole Kmet? Like, I love Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham was my first draft pick on my first dynasty team that I ever played on. Like, so I love Jimmy Graham. But, like, come on, let's get Cole Kmet some of these looks inside the 10. Like, just watching Jimmy do it, I know he's still capable, but I think Kmet can do a lot of the same things. So with Kmet this week, I've got him in my tier 4. The matchup is pretty solid, though, actually, against the Ravens linebackers. They've had some struggles with the young linebacker core and some issues with the safeties, too. So he'll probably be just outside my top 12. So he's a potential streaming option this week as well. And then really the main thing to talk about, in this game, Ian, is the return of David Montgomery. We didn't get to spend a lot of time on it because we were really going into a bye week, with the Bears. But wow, coming back, to 85% of the snaps, 62% of the rushing attempts, 68% of the routes, 7% of the targets, 100% of short down and distance, 100% of the work inside the 5, 100% of the long down and distance, and 94% of the 2-minute offense. That is what you call an MF and every down back, Ian.
He's back. He's back.
He's back. So we were a little worried, right? Because Khalil Herbert really has looked good. Now Damian Williams has still been injured. Damian Williams, is the toughest guy to track down, in a box score, because you're always like, why is he so low? And I swear we always get some sort of a note. No, him and Darrell Henderson are the two. Well, he got nicked up and he was out for these 3 series. And sure enough, you go back and you're like, oh, yeah, he was gone and then he was back. I know the last game he got knocked out early, the last game before David Montgomery. So we'll keep an eye on it. I know they do have a specific role they want, him in. But even if we go back to the beginning of the year, Ian, he was really a non-factor. It was still really more all about David Montgomery. So for Montgomery this week, he'll be in my top 18. Again, I haven't settled on where he's at. I was just looking at, our actual projections on the site. I don't see him right now. So he's definitely going to be higher than 0. So we'll talk with Kevin about that. But yeah, so he'll be in my top 18. I'm looking at my top 18 right now because I do have those ranked. So I've got Barkley at 16. I've got James Robinson at 15. Got Myles Gaskin at 17. He probably fits somewhere in there, around James Conner. I'll probably put him ahead of Joe Mixon, to be honest. So he'll probably be somewhere between 18 and 15 in my ranks this week. But he's a guy that we can completely fire up.
You said you took Jimmy Graham in your first ever dynasty. How'd that end? Is he still on the squad, or did you have to trade him away?
No, my team name is still the same. It's Cram My Graham. But wow, yeah,
so you, like the Bears, also gave Jimmy Graham a no trade clause.
No, he's not on the team. It's he's only there in namesake, Ian.
Wow.
He long ago left the squad. Although my tight ends are pretty bad right now in that dynasty format, maybe Jimmy Graham could start for me. I've got Evan Ingram. No, I've got Dawson Knox, so I just got him back. But yeah, it's man, that's a long time ago now. It's weird when you think about your old leagues and you're like, oh man, that was probably 10 or 12 years ago. When I
actually only had my first Dynasty League start 3 or 4 years ago. I was a little bit late to the game, and I felt really good about getting my tight end position solved early, scooped up OJ Howard, and 0 championships later, we are trying to solve that problem. Packers at the Vikings. Green Bay opened at -1.5. They're up to 2.5 point favorites. Game total is up to 49.5 after opening at 48. Good luck covering Devontae Adams, Minnesota. This year, they did not have a single player ranked inside of PFF's top 50 highest graded cornerbacks in coverage grade. Cameron Dantzler is 55th. Patrick Peterson, still in IR, is 58th. Then we get Bashad Breeland and Mackenzie Alexander coming in at 107 and 122. Not great. I understand we saw a pretty awful version of Rodgers coming off the COVID list. Didn't get to practice at all. I do think we'll at least get back to seeing Devontae do what he does best, and that is terrorize Mike Zimmer in this Vikings secondary. So continue to fire up Devontae. Consensus top 3, if not top 1 receiver in Fantasyland. But the main man, A.J. Dillon, we told you on the waiver pod, blow every bit of fab you need to. If you need to do personal favors for your friends in order to get A.J. Dillon on your squad, consider that. Mow the lawn, do whatever you need to do to get this guy on your squad. Because, Dwayne, the more I was looking at him today, He's been incredible so far in his opportunities. Second highest graded rusher dating back to last season with at least 100 carries, behind only the guy who he kind of looks like sometimes, Derrick freaking Henry himself. So at least in terms of just bowling balls in the league that people should want to tackle the least, I do think Dillon is somehow already on that short list. This year, only James Robinson has had a higher percentage of his carries get at least 2 yards after contact. So he's consistently getting it, man. And that's the thing. I think sometimes these yards after contact numbers can be skewed. Guy breaks a tackle at the line of scrimmage, runs for a 70-yard touchdown, he gets 70 yards after contact. The fact that Dillon does it time and time again at a level of James Robinson tells you all you need to know about the guy. So as we went over, Kylan Hill, not in the picture, something that I've just always been aware of. And because of that, we got Dillon just really set up to see the sort of 3-down role that we've always hoped, Aaron Jones could have. Funny how this continues to happen with all of our backup running backs. Vikings, one of just 3 defenses allowing a positive EPA per run play this season. Fire up Dillon, fire up Adams, all the confidence in the world. Rodgers is really the only one I guess you can't feel too good about, at least among the core starters. Not that the Vikings, I think, will shut him down or anything like that. We know he's always got that 300-yard, 3-touchdown potential, but just based on, generally hasn't had a ton of overwhelming success with the complementary weapons. And we have seen Rodgers look a bit more like the guy we saw in 2018, 2019 compared to 2020. So, Dwain, interested to see where you have Rodgers in the quarterback ranks, because I don't think we need to squeeze him in the top 12 necessarily. Not saying that teams should be feeling bad about starting him, but top 12, top 15, I wouldn't be against it.
Yeah, and the way I look at Rodgers, and I categorize him this way, like in the utilization report, when I do my updates on rest of the season ranks, he's really kind of a boom bust low end QB1. Like okay. in the right situation where the game script goes right and they really need it, Rodgers can be fine. He could be a top 3 quarterback that week. But then there's weeks where they can just completely let their foot off the gas and they don't need to, and they don't. And then there's also the situation where, look, let's face it, like they don't have there. It's not like there's a plentiful weapons here, like right. There's 20 things defenses have to worry about. When you really face good squads that can take away Adams or at least do some things to force you, to get creative with what you're doing with Adams, then that can be a problem. Like for the Packers, as good as he and Devontae Adams are. So I've got him at 10 this week, but I agree. You don't have to squeeze him in there. Like I've got Russell Wilson after him, and then I got Tannehill right after that. Then you get into like your Justin Fields, Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins types.
Yeah,
so,
I still rank Rodgers
play him over
like
too. Cousins and Carr, right? You can make an argument for Tannehill because Tannehill is actually kind of doing the same thing that Rodgers is, right? He's kind of having to try to make something out of not having a lot around him. He's really got one really good passing weapon, and they're trying to have to do it all through play action and different things like that.
All right, now before we turn it over to you for the Vikings, Dwain, I just want to give a quick shout out, friend of the podcast, Rich Rebar over at Sharp Football Analysis, always doing great work. Saw this tweet before the show though. Dalvin Cook has been tackled at the 1-yard line, a league high 5 times, and then did not score a touchdown afterwards. Dwain, the utilization for Dalvin continues to look great, but can we get this guy to work as the number 2 running back that everyone drafted him to be? Is this finally the Dalvin Cook true blow up week?
Well, look, it's coming. Like I know we want to say it is the true. Like, but it does eventually.
Triple true, man.
It's got to eventually. It's like a triple rainbow all the way, man. It's sometimes these things are weird, but with Cook, it's just like the Darren Waller questions we get, right? Oh my God, what's up with Darren Waller? You're like, look, you can't ask for better than what Darren Waller's getting. It's just teams are trying to take him away. But well, who else are you going to play over Darren Waller? There's not very many names, right? Same thing with Dalvin Cook. Like you're going to get him out there. This week he's got, an average matchup, I would say. And really Cook's one of those players you don't care. Like the matchup doesn't change things a lot for him. It changes him by 2 or 3 spots. Like Christian McCaffrey's got a tough matchup this week. We don't care. Like he's still going to be in our top 3 running backs no matter what. And so Dalvin Cook really still, if you look at his utilization, and like that's the conversation he belongs in. He's still in that. And to your point, like that shows you right there, that stat you just gave, 5 tackles inside the 1 and not getting to score right on the next carries. Like those are just weird random things, and the way the play calling worked out. Like you give 3 of those to Dalvin, how much does that boost up, right? Where he's sitting today, and he's a player that we know we've already missed. Is it 3 games we've missed from Dalvin this season, Ian? 2 I know 2 at least, maybe 3 games where we've been without Dalvin Cook. At least 3 if you count the games where he's had to leave early, right? So, and we've seen Alexander Madison come in and do really well. So yeah, with Cook, I've got him number 4 this week in my rankings. If you look at his utilization, the thing that is down for him, Ian, versus what we saw last year is it's his target share. We've seen him in that 12, 13% target range. This year, he's only at 8% of the targets. So really, the utilization of kind of Tyler Conklin, and then this KJ Osborne role that they didn't really have last year, feeding, and not that those guys are getting fed a ton, but it's just enough that really last year, it was Jefferson, it was Thielen, right? And then it was Dalvin Cook. And that was the order that we were talking about. So what in the world is going on?
You see the Kerryon Johnson news?
No, Packers I'm just laughing because something's going on with my earbuds. My Apple's Music just started randomly playing something in my ear, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Anyway, no. So wait, did something happen with Kerryon Johnson? Is he singing in my ear?
I was just kidding. He's getting a workout with the Packers. I didn't think that was enough.
You're like, Dwayne, stop the show. Yeah. Kerryon Johnson, go. Sorry, good save, Ian. Good save. So anyway, I'm Cook. It's just really around the target shares. I was going to keep trying to push through, and it kept playing. So anyway, we're good to go now. As far as Kirk Cousins, man, like looking at it, like this guy. So here are his finishes on the season: 14, 6, 5, 28, 21, but then a 2, a 21, and then a 6 and a 6. So it's like Kirk Cousins. If we look at him, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 finishes, Ian, this season inside the top 6 as a fantasy quarterback. So he's really a hard player to fade. And again, it's like he has a tougher matchup this week, but it doesn't scare me. Packers don't really scare me, even though it does show up as being, one of the harder matchups on the slate. So I'm fine with Cousins as a high-end QB2. You want to call him a low-end QB1. I would not argue with you. You just heard, the finishes that I gave you. There is a chance that this game shoots out, right, between these two divisional opponents. So that's always a positive. I don't think folks need me to really say anything about Justin Jefferson or Adam Thielen unless you're something you want to know, Ian, because you start them. They're just two players that you start every week. Justin Jefferson's a top 12 receiver for me. Thielen is in my top 24. They've both been in those spots all season long. I think there was one period where Thielen may have creeped down into the high-end wide receiver 3 territory for me, but you just start them both every week.
Yeah, shout out to Kirk Cousins, one of only 10 quarterbacks averaging at least 20 fantasy points per game this year. We said all offseason, Dwayne, draft Kirk Cousins. We won't talk about the whole rationale, the whole reason why, Trey Lance, Justin Fields. Who cares about those guys? We got Kirk Cousins. We got that top 10 quarterback. Got to feel good about him holding down the squad. But man, Trey Lance, if you could ever get that job before this end of the season stretch, would be a lot cooler if you did. So Colts at the Bills. Buffalo opened up 4.5 point favorite, now up to 7.5. Game total at 50, down from 51.5. This Bills defense, you can talk about them not having played the toughest of schedules, but we're also in week 11. They can't control that, and they have been incredible. Number 1 in just about everything. Yards per attempt allowed, explosive pass play rate, quick pressure rate, fantasy points per game allowed to quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. The Bills are number 1 in all 3 of those. So really, it's a bad matchup for every single position group in this game, and I could see a situation where Wentz and company just kind of melt down in this spot. The defense has been that good, and if you face a Josh Allen that is going to have his head out of his ass and playing the best football that he's capable of, there's just not many teams in the NFL, I think, that can really hang with this squad. So Jonathan Taylor, we're starting him even if there's a fire. No doubt about it. And honestly, Dwayne, us as a community might need to take a step back about even complaining about the usage. What more do we want here? He got 84% snaps last week, 21 carries, and 7 targets. Marlon Mack has played 5 snaps since week 7. Even the targets on the season, Jonathan Taylor is at 35. Nyheim Hines is at 39. Weeks 1 through 5, 1 through 6, okay, we could bitch and moan, and we had that one, I forget who they were playing, but when Nyheim Hines was out there getting the carries in the final 3 minutes.
It's just the way it happens, Ian. It gets in our head. Right? It's 93 yards at the end of the first quarter. He's going to have an awesome day. No, 117. It's just the way that it plays out, I think, is what gets people so tilted. To your point, if you look at the raw utilization, it's not bad. It's great. It's not the best, but it's just below the best of what you can expect.
It's And yeah, if it's not Derrick Henry, it's not McCaffrey, and maybe it should be because
it's just in that
Taylor's
tier
been
below
that
that.
good. But yeah, it's so just maybe chill out a little bit, people. He's still the RB2 in PPR points per game, and you are absolutely loving it. So even though we got this good Bills run D, who cares? We are starting Jonathan Taylor with confidence per usual, and I'll be interested to see if Michael Pittman can overcome this matchup. It really hasn't been on him because he's been having these kind of up and down weeks in the most recent history. Once people kind of started to get comfortable starting him every single week, he starts having some of these duds. It's just been with the targets. Like 3 of his last 4 games, he's caught 4 of 4 targets, 5 of 6 targets, 5 of 5 targets. Week before that, 2 of 3 targets, 6 of 7 targets. He's catching almost everything thrown his way, or he's drawing a pass interference penalty. We're just not getting these sort of game scripts where Carson Wentz really needs to air it out. So maybe this is the week. They're playing from behind. We know T.Y. Hilton's out there, but again, I don't think that's necessarily getting in the way of Pittman. I just think it's been them beating up on the Jets, leading the entire game against the Jaguars, beating up on the 49ers, beating up on the Texans. The only game that we really saw them need to throw the ball to Pittman was that back and forth Titans game, and he finished with 15 targets. So sneaky spot for Pittman to potentially break out and have a great game, even though the matchup isn't the best. So Tre'Davious White is fantastic, but we have not seen him shadow all season long and track a specific wide receiver. Don't think he'll be doing that on Sunday. And if the Bills just treat Pittman like a normal guy in single coverage, could be a problem. This year, he's caught 23 of 34 targets in man coverage, 347 yards and 5 touchdowns. PFF's 12th highest grade receiver against single coverage looks. So something to keep an eye on there. Again, starting Jonathan Taylor with confidence, and Pittman, I think I probably will be given the lean towards in most close start-sit questions. Dwayne, Bills, we kind of had it figured out, but this Cole Beasley rib injury is throwing a wrench into things, man. We got that to worry about. I believe he only played 9 snaps last week. And we have Matt Breida come out of nowhere and make this a 3-headed committee. What are your thoughts, I guess, on this suddenly crowded wide receiver and running back situations?
Yeah, I'll start with the backs. Number one, for the first time, basically all season, the Bills don't have like one of the best matchups on the slate. They have had a great run of matchups for backs, so if you look at the Colts, it's actually going to probably be bottom 3, bottom 5 matchup this week. So that's just really helping me get away from Moss, get away from Singletary. I both have them in tier 5. So, they're going to be down in the 40s in my ranks because of just the unknown of Breida. Maybe high 30s, but that'll be as high as it gets. I'm just looking at it right now. But yeah, they're going to be 2 players I'm really trying to avoid. It's kind of funny. Breida, I think he had like 11% of the snaps and did all that work like with barely anything.
Oh yeah, it was like 6 touches and like 9 snaps or something.
Yeah,
ridiculous.
He's an explosive player. He and McKenzie are like 2 guys that are on that roster, right? That when you need plays, they can give them to you.
I wonder if he was just active because of the Beasley situation. Now, he did line up in the backfield. It was running back stuff, but you're right, because I think it might have just been more of a different look than truly taken away from Moss and Singletary. We'll see what happens this week with it. There's a lot of different variables there.
Yeah, and I mean, you see these teams do this kind of stuff all the time. Like we've seen it with Miami, like over the last several weeks because of all the injuries they've had. I mean, basically they're running 2 and 3 tight ends out there. They look more like the Cleveland Browns offense, but they don't run. They're still throwing the ball out of like 3 tight end sets. So yeah, you have some of that with Buffalo. It was I want to say, I'm pulling it up right now. I want to say it was their lowest utilization of 11 personnel in the season last week. Yes, it was. Only 45% of their snaps did they use the 3 wides. They were up to 17% last week. That was their season high in 12 personnel. And then they used 2 backs in the backfield 28% of the time, which was their second most on the season. So yes, these teams, they make these adjustments based on 1, the game plan, 2, the availability of their players. And so that's probably what happened last week. You did get Dawson Knox back in the game, so I think that helped give them a little more flexibility as far as what they might want to do with some different personnel groupings. So we'll have to keep an eye on it. But yeah, the whole thing with Beasley, it does put a little bit of a wrench in it. But like what it does is, you can feel pretty good about Emmanuel Sanders. You can feel good about, Stephon Diggs. Last week, for whatever reason, as far as Diggs is concerned, like he got like 60% of his, snaps were against single man coverage. Like it was like right around 55%, which is like by far like his highest of the season. And what did he do? He said, yes, thank you. I will take this. And so he had, one of the big games we've really been waiting on with Diggs, and he's a nightmare. You guys have seen him when he's in man coverage, like he just turns guys like all around. He's a really great route runner. So with Diggs, got him in my top 5 this week, even though, Indy is kind of a tough matchup against wide receivers. I don't really care because it's Josh Allen. He's going to drop back to pass 45, 50 times. He's going to use play action on half of them. And we could have a condensed version of the pecking order here if Cole Beasley is out again. So love Diggs, got him in the top 5. I've got right now I've got Emmanuel Sanders at 33, Ian, but I wouldn't argue anybody like that ranked him like anywhere from probably 28 to 36, somewhere in that range, this week. Again, not the greatest matchup, but 28.75 implied points, 50 point total for the game. Those both look really good. And again, we know the Bills are going to throw all the time. So stay away from the backs this week in Buffalo if you can. You guys are probably like, duh, Dwayne, we know this. We don't know why you still try it. We could have told you something, and thank you. I appreciate it when you guys do because sometimes I do need help. Dawson Knox, Ian, his routes got up to 70% last week. We were used to seeing him up over 80. Just wasn't targeted that heavily, but I think we could easily see that just flip on at any moment. So I've still got him as a low-end tight end 1 right now. I know a lot of people had him up like earlier in the years, like a mid-range tight end 1. Even some people I saw high-end tight end 1. I was never quite there just because there's so many mouths to feed. But if he can be at 70% of the routes, let's put it this way. If in Buffalo, if you get to run a route 70% of the times they pass, that's actually worth more than a lot of teams you getting an 80%. So because they run so many passing plays. So he does belong in that low end tight end 1 range. So don't be afraid of the box score last week. Yes, he could give you, another small number this week, but he is out there. He's in a good offense. So I think with Dawson Knox, you got to kind of trust the fact that he is on the field plenty in a good offense. And that's just what you kind of have to lean into with him.
I would rank him ahead of kind of that big group that we always talk about, the borderline, the Dan Arnolds, the RSJs when he's healthy of the world and stuff like that, Conklin and all those guys. So same page. Lions at the Browns, Cleveland sitting as a 10-point favorite. Game total is at 45, down from 47. I mean, the Jared Goff experience just gets worse and worse by the week. He had a clean pocket last week, wide open Khalif Raymond running for a potential 40-yard score. And there was never one moment in the play where you thought that it could be a completion.
It's so funny, Ian, because you saw some of the stuff I was doing, digging into some of our deeper metrics with man coverage and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. You've been doing some cool stuff with it too. And Khalif Raymond was the name that kept showing up on the list that he wasn't meant to be on the list to talk about. It was to talk about the other players, right. But he's on the list, and he was on 3 of these lists, and I kept seeing everybody jump into the threads being Khalif Raymond, and right away, right out of the gate, Khalif Raymond's open and freaking Jared Goff can't hit it.
Bro, and I'm not surprised. Khalif Raymond, when the Titans would use him, he was just kind of this one-trick pony field stretcher, and he figured, okay, well, we probably can't do it every game. And, we haven't really gotten a good chance to see that because of how bad Jared Goff has been and just how risk-averse he's been. Come on, man. You're playing for the Lions. You guys don't have a win. Open it up a little bit. Him and Mike White, only quarterbacks with an average target depth below 7 yards, and Goff joins Ben Roethlisberger as the league's only 2 quarterbacks to throw short of the sticks on at least 60% of their passes this season. He's just really not giving them much of a chance. He's doing a great job tanking them, keeping them somewhat competitive in these games, and they are, looking good to get that number 1 overall pick. Just a shame to see truly one of the league's more efficient quarterbacks in 2017-2018 reduced to maybe the single most unwatchable player at the position in the league. Luckily, we do have DeAndre Swift. Truly had his best game as a rusher in Week 10, forced 7 missed tackles in Week 10 alone, only had 5 in weeks 1 through 8 as a pure rusher. So that was great to see. And based on his utilization, Dwayne, he's always been someone that we can put in the top 10, top 12 in full point per reception formats because he's getting all the just ridiculous receiving work. But to see him play week high, 93% snaps, have over 30 carries, it's great to see them really trust him in that role. So we got to keep an eye on Jefferson's Jefferson, right? His injury status, if he's going to be back.
Jamar Jefferson, yep.
Jamal Williams
you pronounce the next guy.
Nope, not going to. Godwin. I know know his first name. We got Godwin showing there. But either way, like clearly they are content with Jamal Williams out of the picture to give Swift that full 3-down role. So he's someone that needs to be in fantasy lineups of all shapes and sizes. And I think it's really true. Even if Jamal Williams comes back, it's not a given that Williams would walk back into his usual role. And at the end of the day, Swift, one of just 5 running backs this year, averaging at least 19 expected PPR points per game. I get it. Myles Garrett and company, not the easiest matchup. We're not feeling like the Lions are going to be making too many trips, deep into enemy territory, but those targets are just so worthwhile in fantasy football. And if we're actually getting a rushing floor for a change too, that makes Swift one of the best players at his position that you can target in fantasy land. And, I really just skipped the, I wish I could skip this part because it just kind of makes me mad. But yeah, Dwayne, someone named Brock Wright had 2 targets on 3 routes last week. TJ Hawkinson had 1 target in 70 minutes of action. Like, I know there's been a lot of bad stuff happening in 2021. I don't want to, really just overreact here, but Hawkinson having 1 target in 70 minutes of action was maybe the worst thing that happened to me in the last year. I don't even have much Hawkinson in fantasy. I'm just that mad about it because who else are you throwing the ball to, Jared? Seriously, Brock Wright? That's what we're doing here? Come on, man. Before the bye, Hawkinson was tight end.
Sounds like a vegetable. You better eat your Brock Wright. If you have to, sit down and eat it.
Tight end 7, tight end 10, overall tight end 1 before the bye. We're going to pretend like this never happened, both for my sanity and because I think that's probably the right move in fantasy football land. Continue to start Hawkinson. If you happen to be like incredibly blessed, you have Hawkinson and Kyle Pitts on the same team or something, okay, in that scenario, we don't need to start him. But God forbid, unless you have 2 of the top 6, maybe top 7 tight ends, depending on Dallas Goedert's status, you need to keep starting TJ Hawkinson, people. Last week sucked. We're never going to get that back. Just move on. Don't let yesterday's goose egg lead to tomorrow's missed opportunity. So enough about the Lions, Dwayne. Now we can talk about the Browns. There's so many more guys to talk about. At least we have everyone's, your favorite running back's favorite running back in Dearness Johnson.
Yeah, and so we're hoping that Nick Chubb is back. So, and we'll see on Kareem Hunt. Like, Kareem Hunt could be in the mix. This is definitely one of those teams where we are going to have to go back and we'll have to reevaluate it, as we get closer to game time. But right now, and I have Nick Chubb in my top 3 backs. My assumption is that he will play, and that we could see another week without Hunt. We just haven't got an update lately on Hunt. And originally, when he got hurt, it was a 4 to 6 week injury, and so we're kind of at that 4-week point. So technically, he could be back, so this could be something where I would be moving Chubb down by like tomorrow, or Thursday as we get more info. But right now, I'm leaning to Chubb probably being the lead back for the game. Running back strength of schedule. Well, the team Ian just talked about. Who is it? The Detroit Lions. Anytime you hear that, that means the next team you get to talk about after that is going to have like good matchups across the freaking board. And that is the case. So Chubb has the 3rd best matchup on the ground, running back strength of schedule this week. Offensive line run blocking advantage is an 83. That might be the highest I've seen this year. So that's basically taking the dominance that is the Browns line and it's pitting it against Detroit's defensive line. When you put those 2 things together, you get this really big number. Like, the best you can get is a 100 and it's an 83. So that's a huge score for them. So Chubb, man, could be in a huge spot. Dearness Johnson, I'm still probably going to put him down at the top of my tier 5. Assuming Damian Harris plays, he'll be right there around Ramondre Stevenson. Right now, I also don't know what to do with Kamara. We'll talk about that in a bit. But so I've got Ingram lower, kind of down around those guys. I've got Dearness Johnson right there in that mix, right, with those players that have situations that are pretty good matchups. Not going to be their lead backs, but the game could get out of hand. They could see more work, that kind of thing. So Chubb is in my top 3. Feel really great about him. Baker has a great matchup too, but I really don't care just because they're willing to run the ball the whole time. He could come up with one of these boom efficiency games like what we've seen with Jimmy Garoppolo over the last 3 weeks. The problem is he doesn't have the weapons around him that Jimmy Garoppolo does. Right? He doesn't have a Deebo Samuel. Well, he doesn't have he doesn't have.
Now that's what we're saying now. Oh, Baker doesn't get enough help. When we do get him help, it freaking spins him out of control. That's the route we're going now.
Yeah, I just don't use Baker, period. I don't have a Baker route, so I don't know what the route to
It's
Baker
the volume.
is.
I don't want to hear excuses for him, though. He's got the best O-line in the league. He's got some of the best pass-catching running backs.
Not an excuse.
3 great
it's just
tight
more
ends.
it's just more of a, even if they did decide to throw the ball more, it's he's the problem, it's also what do I get excited about? Like, I'm just trying to look at the complete picture, Ian. Don't take it personal. Come on, man. Yeah. I'm with you. So Baker, I got at 23 against the Lions. That tells you what I think about Baker Mayfield. I've got him at 23 and he's playing the freaking Lions. That's probably the lowest quarterback I've had ranked against the Lions all season. So definitely out on Baker. Chubb's in a good spot. Well, if you know I don't like Baker, I'm also not very big on the receivers. Donovan Peoples-Jones, I want to give him a chance, Ian. They do have the best wide receiver strength of schedule metric on the week, a 10 out of a 10 for he and Jarvis Landry. The problem with Peoples-Jones is he just hasn't been able to beat man coverage. Like anytime he gets pressed man, it's a problem. I think he's beating it like 17% of the time on the season. You want to be up over 30% in that metric. So he's almost like half of what the league average is. And so that's been a problem for Peoples-Jones. He can hit the big play whenever he can, get open. He's still a young player, so you don't want to write him off, right? It's not like we've got that many reps out of Donovan Peoples-Jones, so the sample size is not huge or anything. Jarvis Landry can beat press coverage, but he runs about -3 yards down the field every time. So it's just kind of hard to get much out of the targets you do get. And it's a situation where you'd really like, man, if I love Jarvis, but it's like if Jarvis, like, in his game if he had like this other gear of like being able to make the big play after the catch instead of basically like make the gritty tough catch. Sorry, Jacoby Brissett, that's your brand. We won't do it anymore. But makes that tough catch over the middle, and it's like basically getting tackled right away. Right? We don't see a lot of run after the catch with Jarvis Landry these days. Not that you don't ever see it. The player, to me, Ian, like the Browns should get more involved, and they just don't. Like they will show flashes of it. But it still feels like it's David Njoku. Like if there's somebody sitting on their team that could really attack the middle of the field, create some mismatches with the safeties, Austin Hooper's fine, but Njoku is the player, right, that's got more speed. I know he's more of an athlete than a football player. I've heard that. I've watched a lot of the film of him too. Like he's not like the best guy with his hands, but that's okay when you have a play action game like they have, Ian, and the spaces behind the linebackers when you use play action when you're the Browns. Like, it doesn't matter. Njoku can body catch it. Tell him you don't even care if he uses his hands. Be like, just trap it to your body. Doesn't matter. Of course, Baker can't medicine ball it like high and make him have to take a huge hit from a safety. But Njoku's the player I would like to see get more involved. But it's just not happening. It's kind of inconsistent back and forth. We did see him have that one big game earlier in the season. So nothing to do with the tight ends. Jarvis Landry, Ian, I will have probably at wide receiver between 36 and 40. And then I'll have Donovan Peoples-Jones probably around 45. I do think Peoples-Jones is the one, like if you're just kind of taking a swing or something, especially like in DFS and you're just hoping he comes up with like 2 catches for 80 and a T, like that could be Donovan Peoples-Jones this weekend. So really, it's just all about Nick Chubb.
Yeah, there's just not enough volume or really efficiency when they do get thrown the ball for any of these wide receivers to do anything. Like Jarvis Landry doesn't have a game with 75 yards and he hasn't scored all season. Like, do we think Jarvis Landry sucks now? Of course not. He's not getting fed the ball as much. And when he is, Baker just hasn't been good targeting the wide receivers. 21st in PFF passing grade to wide receivers, 13th to running backs, 11th to tight ends. In fantasy land, just don't need to worry about it. Luckily, I just, drive myself crazy worrying about this in non-fantasy formats, Dwain. And that is
I will say that Baker is the guy that always pops up too high in the original projections that I pull. And I have to move him way down the list. I'm like, Baker Mayfield in the top 15. No, not on my watch, Ian. Got to move him down.
My goodness. But yes, with Chubb, I think RB3 does make sense. We really shouldn't feel good. I'm happy you compared Dearness to Ramondre Stevenson because that's kind of the exact same route I was sticking here. Because before Chubb got put on the COVID list and that blowout they had against the Bengals, the first 3 quarters of that game, it was Chubb 20 snaps, Dearness Johnson only 4. Chubb outcarried him 9-1 in those first 45 minutes. So they really seem ready to fully turn over the backfield to Chubb. He won't get like 95% snaps or anything, but at a minimum, it does not look like Dearness Johnson is getting anything near what Kareem Hunt was seeing as a compliment to Chubb.
It is one of those days where if we don't have Kareem Hunt active, like you're giddy with Chubb.
I don't think he's that close, man. I was looking at it.
That's what I'm thinking too. But it's like it's one of those rare games where you are just like, and who knows, you could be let down because this happens. Yeah. But like when you see the Lions and you see Nick Chubb and all the things that are there, like it's like. You don't normally get this, but like there is a chance like he could have like 175 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like it could be that kind of day.
But yeah, Stefanski said in mid-October that Hunt could miss up to 6 weeks. Now, we could get back sooner, but looking at the Browns' schedule, they do have a Week 13 bye. So if Dearness is playing good, if Chubb's good, I think it might make sense to hold out Hunt until they're back from that bye in Week 14. Obviously, we'll update this situation on the Friday Injury Podcast if any new information comes to light. We got the football team at the Carolina Panthers. Carolina opened as 1-point faves. That has gone up to 3.5. Game total down to 43.5 after opening at 46.5. So Antonio Gibson, we saw it last week. When there is a weird game where Washington can play with the lead, have some positive game script, he has 20 carry upside, and this matchup is winnable for him. I know the Panthers have been a top 5 defense and fantasy points allowed to running backs, but that's largely been more so because they've been so good at stopping the receiving production to that position. Much more of a middle of the pack defense in terms of, yards per carry, yards before contact per carry, things of that nature. So Gibson, I think we can kind of put him a couple of spots lower than like Damian Harris. It's not really the same matchup in terms of expected positive game script, but at least we know that it's not going to be a situation like it looked like before the bye where we legitimately have Patterson coming in and stealing like a large chunk of the early down work. Honestly, I think having the mini 3-back committee they got going now, it hurts J.D. McKissic more than anyone because now he's not really a threat to start flirting with double-digit carries himself. So McKissic, it's just impossible to predict him at this point. If Carolina jumps out to a huge lead on Washington, I'm sure McKissic will have himself a hell of a day. If not, could be another forgettable one. So Gibson, classic low-end RB2 in this spot. I just want better for Terry McLaurin, man. I don't quite understand the change in role they've had from him last year to this year. Last year, they really did a good job with Alex Smith, a limited quarterback throwing downfield, just making sure that McLaurin got his touches. He had a 9.7 yard average target depth, averaged a robust 5.2 yards after the catch per reception. This year, 12.8 yard average target depth, just 3.8 yards after the catch per reception. He has been like the biggest boomer bust receiver in the league, and that's not his game. Like they're forcing him into that more than I think they need to, because in my opinion, Dwayne, Terry is a legit number one that can win at any level of the defense, but he's being pigeonholed as this contested catch downfield specialist. He has a league high 35 contested targets this year. He's caught a league high 21 of them, and he has the best contested target catch rate at 43.2%. So he's getting these contested targets. If any of you have watched Terry McLaurin play even a couple times, you know that he's not this guy unable to separate. So I'm not going to, chalk that up as a him problem. I think it's more so the routes he's running and Taylor Heineke just not doing a great job of giving him legit chances to make easy catches. So I just wish it was easier for him, Dwayne, because last week, Terry McLaurin, I think he finished 33rd or 35th or something around there. That was the first time all year he didn't finish either 45th or worse or in the top 5. So we just have not seen him provide any level of a floor. He's either going off or completely dudding. And I think a lot of that is the way they've been using him. So not saying that's guaranteed to change. I mean, this matchup in particular with Dante Jackson and Stephon Gilmore locking up the outside of the formation, I do think it could be problematic for him. Don't look now, Dwayne, but I think the Panthers could have a little bit of a, potential late season run in them. If Cam Newton can just steady the ship a little bit. You got McCaffrey healthy. We know DJ Moore is going to have better days. And this defense, if they don't regress, man, they might be one of the best units in the league still. I was looking at the EPA allowed per run and pass play in 2021, and you see all these teams huddled around each other. And I think I mentioned on another pod how the Vikings, Chargers, and the Chiefs are the only defenses that are allowing positive EPA per run play. But down in the bottom left of this chart I have, where you basically have only two defenses that have been both awesome against the run and the pass. You have the Buffalo Bills, and then you also have the Carolina Panthers, and that's been despite having to deal with the Sam Darnold experience throughout the years. So really, man, Carolina, they might have the sort of just run-heavy offense now with Cam, with C-Mac to make a lot of noise here moving forward in the season. What do you think, Dwayne, about at least their fantasy aspirations in this spot? Are we in on Cam? Are we back? Because he's back.
Yeah, and I think we have to be. Anything we can do to, give DJ Moore a chance. It's
that's what it comes down to.
Seriously, it does. Because DJ Moore, this was going to be a season, Ian. We saw it. In those first few weeks when Darnold was performing okay and he was hot, and we saw how much utilization DJ Moore was getting and what he was doing with that. It was a big season was coming. So even if we can just stabilize to average quarterback. If we could just get average quarterback from Cam Newton, I think we would be really good, in really good shape. Like anything but terrible, right? Really, because that's what Darnold's been. Has been terrible. Like I won't elaborate on it again. We've talked about it in the past. But the yards passing per game, like over the last several weeks with Darnold, have just been absolutely terrible. So even if you're getting big utilization like Moore was, it just wasn't something where you could do a lot with it. If you look at him over the last 3 games, as far as DJ Moore, like targets 33%, 25%, 23%. Targets per route run on the season, one of the best in the NFL still at 25%. So the dude's getting open. He's demanding looks. He just needs better looks. And so hopefully Cam Newton can help give him that. I do agree with you that because of the defense, and we've actually seen this shift for several weeks, but you would have the turnovers by Darnold that would just flip the script, right, on the Panthers and change the way they would have to approach the game. But really, for as many turnovers they've had and how often they've had to play from behind and all those sort of things, they haven't been a super pass happy team. When you take all of that into context and you look at what the score differential has been whenever they've ran more and passed more, they've actually already been making this move. So I do agree with you. Now you get Cam Newton. You get Christian McCaffrey back healthy. If you need a third back, I think Chuba Hubbard has shown enough, right? If you want to mix somebody like that in a little bit, you could do that. You could lean more into your defense. And then really you just make this all about, if it is in the passing game, it's just DJ Moore, and you can use Robbie Anderson. Oh, look at Robbie Anderson catching a touchdown last week. You can still get vertical. Anderson has struggled against single man coverage. That's really been his downfall this year. And I think maybe that's part of why we've seen him have so many woes, outside of the fact that he's also been unfortunate. Like we know drops aren't sticky. He's had quite a few drops, but drops are another one of those stats, Ian, when you look at them. And on the surface, it may look really bad, but when you go back and you watch all the drops, like it's really hard to pinpoint. Like, was that the quarterback or the receiver, right? Because I know, like, we chart all these things as, is it within the frame? Is it outside the frame? Is it catchable, uncatchable? All these sort of things. But they're all really, there's a fine line on some of these things. And when I was watching Robbie, like, rarely did I see a ball just placed on Robbie, like, right where it needed to be, right? Almost always an adjustment was needing to occur. Then you get contact, from a defender. Like, so that just puts you in a really tough spot. And so I think Robbie Anderson could see a small bump as well, but it will be, and I guess this doesn't really matter. Like, we haven't had a ton of passing yards anyway, right? So I expect the passing attempts to go down, but what we're hoping for is some efficiency to come out of it. And right, we've actually seen this recipe for Cam, when he made his Super Bowl run, right? Ted Ginn. Like, Ted Ginn was a thing. You remember that, Ian? So, yeah. I mean, it was all about the running game, it was about getting the ball deep, to Ted Ginn and doing some things like that. So we could see, a benefit for Robbie there. The biggest news, Christian McCaffrey, he's he's just making his way back to being, the basic Christian McCaffrey we've already known. He's already doing good in the box scores, PPR finish of 15-4, but his snaps went from 49% to 59%. If you look at his targets, went from 17% to 32%. So short down and distance, he's handling most of that work. Picked up 55% of the long down and distance last week, and he picked up 67% of the 2-minute offense. And the first week back, they had Amir Abdullah handling some of those passing down roles. So they really are, looks like getting McCaffrey back into, I don't think we'll see him ever where we saw him back in the heyday, Ian, of those 95%, 100% snap games. But I think we're going to see him up around the 70 to 80%. And that's plenty for how much they're designing and how much they're getting in the ball. He's going to be the focal point of the offense. It's going to be Christian McCaffrey, then DJ Moore, then Robbie Anderson, and it's all going to be this heavier ground game. So, yeah, as far as my ranks, just real quick on these guys, Cam Newton, I have got right now. He's actually got it's a nice matchup against Washington, but we did see Washington give Tom Brady a hard time last week. But if you look at it, their defensive points against, from a quarterback standpoint, they're giving up 27.5.
Losing Chase is so huge too.
Yeah. It's the most in the league. Losing Chase, is a huge deal. Quarterback strength of schedule, 6.7 out of 10. So it's, an above average. I would call that's really good. That's not great, but that's a good matchup for Newton. So I've got him just outside of my tier 3 this week, Ian, just because I want to see another week from Cam. I want to see how he looks. We actually need to wait and make sure he has fully been named the starter. I know he's getting starter reps in practice this week. So, I mean, I'm kind of looking at it as like it's a given that he's going to be the starter. But with Newton, I just want to see one more week, but I'll probably have him around like quarterback 16 to 18, somewhere in there. So below Fields, below some of the other guys we've talked about like Cousins, but above like your Tua's, your Wentz's, your Heineke's, Garoppolo's, all that group. So he'll kind of be like right between the just below outside of the really good tier guys, but we know they've proven themselves. And then you've got these guys we don't want to start, like Cam will be sitting between those in my rankings. I've got Christian McCaffrey number 2. I've got DJ Moore number 17, despite the fact that Mr. DJ Moore has not given us, he hasn't given us a top 36 performance in the last 3 weeks. But I'm trying to have some faith here, Ian. So I'm going to have him in mid-range wide receiver 2. May drop him to a lower end wide receiver 2 by the time it's all said and done. But I mean, the real takeaway is if you've got him on your fantasy team, you're still probably going to have him in your starting lineup.
I would like to quickly retract my idea that the Panthers could make a run here at the end of the year. Went ahead and pulled up their schedule. Yes, Washington this week. Then they got in Miami. Then they got a bye. Then they got the Falcons. Maybe they rip off 3 wins there, but to close the year in Buffalo, Tampa Bay, in New Orleans, and then in Tampa Bay again. That is not great. Love you, Cam. Not so sure you can get that done. Texans.
Hey, get that mo going. Get that mo going over the next 3 weeks.
Let's go. Texans at the Titans. Tennessee sitting as 10.5-point favorites. Game total down to 44.5 after opening at 50.5. As always, just one guy to talk about in Houston. His name is Brandon Cooks. Have seen more consistency with Tyrod Taylor under center. Started off the year wide receiver 22. Got Tyrod for a couple series, wide receiver 8 in week 2. Last week with Tyrod coming back, or 2 weeks ago, finishes as the wide receiver 23. So we saw some good weeks with Davis Mills as well. Obviously, those offense, I think, has a higher floor with the artist formerly known as Ty God under center. So with Cooks, we have like the epitome of someone that is a wide receiver 1 in terms of usage. He is tied for first with Deebo Samuel and Devontae Adams in target share, outright first place in air yard share, but he's not in a good enough offense. He doesn't have an efficient enough quarterback to turn that wide receiver 1 usage into wide receiver 1 production. Wide receiver 11 in expected PPR fantasy points this year, wide receiver 23 in actual PPR points per game. Hey, Dwain, wide receiver 23, he was going in the late 30s really for most of the offseason. So he's certainly, I think, outperformed expectations. Just a matter of realize that we're going to have some duds here along the way. So if it is a situation where you have, 6 top 24 receivers on your roster, I could see benching Brandon Cooks because we know he's got a lower floor than the other guys. But in this matchup, Titans single worst defense in the league in fantasy points per game allowed to opposing wide receivers. So overwhelming majority, I think, of lineups should try to start Brandon Cooks in them this week. The volume should be there, efficiency should be better, and the matchup is just about as good as we could ask for. So Titans have been playing some better ball in recent weeks. I think a lot of those numbers probably did come a little bit more in the earlier parts of the season. At the same time, volume is king, and Brandon Cooks has more of it than just about anybody else. So yeah, and for the love of God, I mean, fantasy football is supposed to be fun, people. You really want to talk about Houston Texans running backs? Could not be me. Get out of here with that. But Dwain, arguably just as messy running back situation in Houston. You got in Tennessee.
I was like, you're going to say that and then pitch this one to me.
You only got 3 running backs to worry about at least, but yeah, good luck, my friend.
Yeah. Look, I mean, Foreman took a slight lead last week, but it's not enough. I guess you could go with like the revenge narrative, right? Going back to play the Texans. Texans make for a good revenge narrative for anyone, even if you never played for them. It's just like make it your own and just do it. So we'll see what happens with it. I prefer to stay away from the Tennessee backfield. I've got them all down outside my top 40, all 3 of them, just kind of hovering, just outside of that. I don't really know how to dice them up. I've got Foreman slightly ahead, then McNichols, then Peterson, but they're all a few spots apart. I don't think we have enough data to really say, oh, let's pound the table and we know for sure what's going to happen here. We just don't. Even when we have really good data, we don't know for sure what's going to happen, right? All we can do is present it, and a lot of times in these cases, past performance is the best, indicator of what's going to happen in the future. But with this one, it's just been a bit all over the place. The one good thing you have is you do know that Tennessee is willing to be very committed to the running game. We've seen that continue, despite the fact that they don't have Derrick Henry. It's slightly less now, so we've seen it. They are passing a little bit more, but overall they're still pretty committed. But I don't think we haven't necessarily seen them really tested because it's not a game where they've gotten behind or anything. That's definitely probably not going to happen this weekend. So yeah, you probably want to avoid these guys. The really the only 2 players you're thinking about here are Ryan Tannehill. You get the second best matchup from a quarterback strength of schedule. Yes, they're favored by 10.5 points. So, but Tannehill, the nice thing is, he's got 5 rushing touchdowns on the year, so he can give you upside there. Implied points for the Titans this weekend, 27.5. So normally in a game like this would be like the Derrick Henry smash, right? We would be talking about Derrick Henry would be the number 1 ranked fantasy player in all of fantasy football if he was playing this week against the Texans, but he's not. But there is another really good player, Ian, that people want to get down on, people get mad at, and it's funny with A.J. Brown. Like, look. People, do you realize, and I'm saying people, I'm using Ian's people, all of these receivers have down weeks, but for whatever reason with AJ Brown, and I know part of it's because he's been injured, so people really want to use him, right? They've been waiting. You didn't get to use him a lot early in the season, been in and out of the lineup, wasn't 100%. And so now it's like the pressure's on anytime he's on the field. Oh my God, he better be like a top 5 receiver. But look, these things happen. These things happen to the very best receivers. It happens to Justin Jefferson, happens to DK Metcalf. It happens less to Devontae Adams, but it happens to Devontae Adams. It happens to Tyreek Hill. These guys have down games. A.J. Brown's in a great spot this week. Wide receiver strength of schedule, 8.4. Wide receiver cornerback matchup, 90.3. He is in an absolute smash spot. I've got him ranked as my number 3 receiver on the week. And I have seen some tweets, hey, why don't they target him more? Why don't they move him around, do more things? Look, guys, he had 1 game where he wasn't at 30% targets in the last 4 weeks. They are targeting him. They get it to him. Now, they are still a run-heavy team, so those heavy targets don't look like Devontae Adams, right? A 35% target day for Devontae Adams is 12, right? A 35% target day for A.J. Brown is 8. But A.J. Brown just got that big playability, and any one of these, any 2 of these, any 3 of these could be 50, 60, 70, 80-yard romps to the end zone. So you just got to continue to fire him up, and he's in a great spot this week. As far as the tight ends go, I have no clue, Ian. They rotate 7 guys. Most people that are listening to the pod have probably never heard of any of them.
Oh, no, man. We all know Ferkser from those June, July best ball days. But
Ferkser, yes. What the heck, man? He's the one that gets the least looks, and he actually, some of his receiving grades are the best, but he's never out there. So
At least it is always AJB wide receiver 1 season. We got the 49ers at the Jaguars. San Fran up to a 6.5 point favorite, open as -4. Game total resting at 45.5. Jimmy G, PFF's highest graded quarterback over the past 3 weeks, got his weapons back and he is playing better. I guess the frustration is just we've seen Jimmy G play really great and still, unfortunately, wasn't enough in that Super Bowl run that, let's face it, got plenty of help from league's best defense and the most efficient rushing attack along the way as well. So, hey, we'll see Jimmy G. He'll go out there when everyone's healthy. He can make good things happen when the defense isn't wreaking too much havoc. Just let's not, get confused and make this out to be some kind of big career turnaround. I think we kind of know who Jimmy G is, and that's why the allure of Trey Lance is what it is. But for now, got to assume Jimmy G is going to continue to be under center.
I'll be honest, I do not want to see Trey Lance. I have no desire whatsoever.
Why not?
Because he sucks for Deebo Samuel. He's going to take away from Elijah Mitchell. So think of all the fantasy teams right now that have basically figured out, I don't need Trey Lance. I'm good. Elijah Mitchell is a big part of what people are doing in their fantasy seasons. Deebo Samuel, see, Nora agrees. Deebo Samuel is a big part of what people are doing in their fantasy seasons. George Kittle, see, look, she likes all of these. George Kittle is a big deal for people down the stretch in fantasy seasons. Trey Lance potentially torpedoes all of that. Accuracy hasn't looked good, just not on the same page. Anyway, Ian, I get what you're saying. I get excited about Lance as for him, right? The quarterback situation I would like better than Jimmy G, but let's face it, we have plenty of quarterbacks to start. These other positions are what I care about more.
I mean, we saw him for 1 game without his top weapons against the freaking Cardinals. I'm not going to write him off that quick. I know what you're saying. When we have the dual threat quarterback, it takes away from everyone else involved. But hey, credit to Kyle Shanahan. What happened? When we were talking, Dwain, last week about having Kittle, Ayuk, Deebo, one of these guys is going to have to take a step back more weeks than not. What happened? Let's get Deebo Samuel 6 snaps as a true running back, something that he has done throughout his career, and he looks good doing it, man. Really, when Deebo has the ball in his hands, he is just a playmaker, whatever position you want to call him. When I got to talk to Aqib Talib on this very podcast last week, he was comping him to a younger Anquan Bolden, which I different players. Yeah, it's different players, and obviously you maybe don't look the exact same, but in terms of just the struggle.
They have a lot of similarities. Very rugged, work over the middle, good run after the catch. A lot of people don't remember the run after the catch Bolden that we had early in his career.
Right. That's getting them to the ground is a nightmare. Yeah. So I get it from that.
They remember the really more the possession receiver, Anquan Bolden, late in his career, which was also a good version of Anquan Bolden with the Ravens. But before that, when he was with the Cardinals, I mean, this guy, like he could do the rack thing.
Him and Fitz, man, that was a hell of a combo for many, many years. But yeah, look, Kyle Shanahan, he has his two guys in Deebo Samuel and George Kittle, monsters after the catch, and they're pretty damn good getting open and doing all that as well. And he finds a way to get these guys the ball. So over the past 2 years, minimum 100 targets, top players in yards per route run. Number 1 is Deebo Samuel. Number 2 is Devontae Adams. And number 3 is George Kittle. Gotta love what they have brought to the table. So Ayuk, we're seeing the bigger role coming to fruition. But when we have Deebo, when we have George Kittle doing their thing, at a minimum, with Ayuk, I'm happy we don't have to talk about like cutting him at this point. But we're going to see weeks like last one where he only has 4 targets because he is the pretty clear-cut number 3 pass game option. At the beginning of the year, I think it would have been fair to say, hey, 1A, 1B, 1C is pretty definitively number 1 Deebo, number 2 George Kittle, and number 3 Brandon Ayuk. So that's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes, everybody. But let's talk about this running back room. Unfortunate news today. Elijah Mitchell fractured a finger Monday night, but we're getting optimism that despite having surgery on Tuesday, he will be ready to go by Sunday against this Jaguars defense. So if not, we also have JaMycal Hasty, who was hurt last week with the ankle injury and didn't suit up, meaning Jeff Wilson will be the next man up to take a lot of these snaps. Again, we did see Deebo Samuel get 6 snaps as an RB in week 10. He only had 7 of those in weeks 1 through 9 combined, though. So I wouldn't get too carried away thinking that Deebo is all of a sudden going to be getting double-digit carries as a running back. At the same time, man, we don't see, like, Robert Woods was, like, legit, not completely overhauling ranks, but like it was a good tiebreaker to draft Robert Woods over the past few years because he was getting 22, 23 carries per season. Same thing with Curtis Samuel. Like if we can even get 3 to 5 carries per game for Deebo, that's so much more than basically any other receiver is seeing.
I think the JaMycal Hasty role is the key for Deebo because he's really more the jet guy and he comes out there in the passing downs, long down distance, that kind of stuff. And so Elijah Mitchell was actually getting a lot of the work inside the 5 before. He didn't have the success that Deebo did. So I think some of Deebo's additional work does hinge on, JaMycal Hasty.
And it has worked. I mean, look, it's a lot of it has been jets. They've used orbit motion. Like Deebo isn't always getting stuff as a running back, but we don't care. Just give him the ball. What do we always talk about, Dwayne? Dual threat players are a cheat code in fantasy. Usually those are rushing quarterbacks. Those are receiving running backs. Seldomly do we see the rushing wide receiver might just be what we have in Deebo. And if not, he'll do his thing and just continue to torch guys out as a pure receiver. But it is fun to see the way he's being used. So Jaguars defense is not a pushover. They actually have a very good pass rush that I could see giving Jimmy G quite a bit of problems if he's not, on one of his good phases, getting the ball out quickly. But yeah, hopefully Mitchell is good to go. We're going to want to pick up Jeff Wilson. If not, he would instantly be in that, low end RB2 conversation. I think right where Mitchell is, if he is able to start. Obviously, you're feeling great about Deebo, great about George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, more of a lower end wide receiver 3 at this point. Now, Dwayne, we got our Jacksonville Jaguars with James Robinson, who every time he plays, man, 5 straight fully healthy games, top 12 RB or better. James RB1 son, gotta love it. We got one consistent guy out of Jacksonville. Thank you, Urban Meyer. You gave us one.
Yeah, and it was really on a reduced, role last week because they just eased him back in with the Hill injury. Only out there 59% of the snaps, but 57% of the rushing attempts, so almost to 60% in that first game back. That was encouraging, and almost half of the routes as well, so 47%. So I would anticipate you see another step forward. Man, it's I can't remember the player we were talking about. I think it was Gerald Everett, right? Where the timing is just so slightly off, like the players that they work their way up. They basically take over a full role and something like COVID or an injury to a heel, something like that happens. And that's what we saw with James Robinson. He had truly taken over this backfield 100%. And then also, you mentioned some of the stats about him. I think it was either yesterday or the day before. like, man, like he's looked great as far as like yards after contact, missed tackles forced per attempt. Like he is one of the true backs, like that whenever you want like that perfect combination of all those things coming together, he's really done a great job. And he ranks, if you had to rank it where you're looking at utilization plus that, like he's going to be in the top 3 or 4. So let's hope he gets back to that utilization that we saw before. Yeah, the Jags aren't that great on an offense, so you don't have a ton of touchdown upside. But I tell you what, like if they are going to score a touchdown, I mean, I'd put a bet like it's 50% chance it's James Robinson that's going to be the guy that's going to get the touchdown. So, and look, we've seen players like Christian McCaffrey, even this season, like can still continue. Only 6% of his fantasy points have come from, touchdowns. And he's actually still been able, from a points per game standpoint, right? He's still in the top 5. So James Robinson can still be valuable because he is used in all, phases of the game. The matchup isn't really great, but with guys like this, as long as he's healthy, with guys like this, you really don't care. Like you downgrade them a little bit, but when they're getting this kind of volume, James Robinson will be in the middle. He's going to be on the verge of being in my top 12. I'll probably keep him out just because I want to be fully, for sure, like that he is back to 100% health. And then the next week he jumps in. But to your point, like he keeps giving you these top 12 performances anyway. So anybody that ranks him inside the top 12, I don't blame him. The 49ers matchup is a little tough, like for me to get him all the way there from a running back strength of set schedule. It's going to be a bottom 8 matchup this week. Offensive line run blocking advantage will be a bottom 8 matchup this week for the Jaguars. So just a little bit of a pause, but again, not enough that you're not going to start him. You're going to use him. You're not going to use Trevor Lawrence. I'm not going to talk about him. Like he's just a rookie that's still growing up. And you've talked about it, Ian, like with the big time throws and some different things where he's had some drops. Not all of it really falls, to coming back on the shoulders of Trevor Lawrence. But that really leads like to this next thing. I don't want to talk about the receivers either because you really don't want to be using any of them. I mean, we had the debate yesterday where you said, like, if the Girl Scout cookie girl came to my door with a 9mm with a silencer on it, like, would I choose, Jamal Agnew or would I choose Marvin Jones? And I said Jamal Agnew. So that's kind of where we're at right now, with the Jaguars. I do think Agnew is the only player you can use, and I've got him more as a boom bust wide receiver 4, but he does get involved in other facets of the game. And he has one thing that I think they're really looking for on the offense, which is speed. And it shows you he's probably doing some of the things they wanted to do with Travis Etienne, right? And we didn't get to see that. So with Agnew, you can use him, more as that, wide receiver 4. You hope he gets into the wide receiver 3 range. But I'm completely avoiding Laviska Shenault, Marvin Jones Jr. Done with both of those guys. Shenault's really struggling on the outside. He needs to be back in the slot. But that's where they're having to use Agnew because of the injuries. As Ian says, sometimes that's how the cookie crumbles. Maybe this will be something that in a year from now we'll see Chenault's game has grown because he did have to work more outside, but really struggling against press man coverage, not able to get off the line, not able to separate. So that's a problem. Really, the star of the show besides James Robinson here is Dan Arnold. Dan Arnold is, man, like this is kind of crazy, Ian, when I started looking at it because we talked about him yesterday on the waiver wire show. If you look at him, percent of the routes, 74%, 75%, 80%, targets per route run, 19%, 26%, 24%. Those are elite numbers. Like,
he wasn't even on the team until October.
Yeah, and the Jaguars' offense is bad, but those, like I've given you guys the historical, comps and why I care about these numbers across these different positions. And like when you see something like that, like he should be a mid-range tight end 1, right? With every week an upside to be, have the number 1 score of the week, like if he catches 2 touchdowns. But like the utilization looks really good. He's not in a situation where he's just boom bust anymore. I think his utilization is strong enough that you can really count on Dan Arnold. No doubt about it. He'll go out and put a donut up this weekend, Ian. But man, Ian, the other thing, 1.77 yards per route run now. Like he's bumping that thing up towards 2. He's not just getting volume, like he's actually doing things with it. So he's demanding targets. He's actually getting yards, whenever he is in a route. So those are all good things that we want to see, metrics that we care a lot about. And Dan Arnold, he's checking all of those boxes. So this is a guy that I think we're going to talk a lot about heading into 2022. Dan Arnold will be a name in the tight end conversation that we'll be interested in thinking about in the later rounds.
Daniel Day-Lewis Arnold. Actual first game with the Jaguars was September 30th, so my bad, everyone, but you could imagine. Dolphins at the Jets. Miami sitting as 3-point favorites, game total at 45. Myles Gaskin, we had that long stretch with J.D. McKissic only balling out, and I think it was like odd number weeks. Basically what Gaskin has been doing. Over the last 6 weeks, he has finished as a PPR RB2, then the RB47, then the RB9, then the RB35, then the RB8, most recently RB42. So fantasy football doesn't have to be hard. Just start him this week and we'll probably get another top 10 finish. But actually, maybe because the Jets have the league worst defense in PPR points per game. Dwayne, I believe you said you had Gaskin around RB17. I think that is a perfect spot for him. Even with Miami having the 30th ranked offensive line and team run blocking grade, I'm not saying Gaskin is just going to run through these massive holes all day, but he is projected for 19.4 combined carries and targets. That's the 12th highest mark in all of week 11. And then when you look at some of the pass catching running backs against his defense, pretty easy to imagine Gaskin going out, having his 5+ catches, 15+ carries, and pulling off an RB2 performance. So you're getting Gaskin in the starting lineup, and we're also getting Jalen Waddle more times than not. Really, last week disappointed a little bit, but we all know when things happen on Thursday Night Football, they feel like 5 times as worse as they really probably are in reality. So only the wide receiver 37 last week. Before that, had 3 of his 4 weeks as the wide receiver 16 or better. He's the wide receiver 30 in PPR points per game this season, wide receiver 22 in expected usage. So Jets secondary, we did see them ranking pretty damn high in the earlier parts of the year in terms of just fantasy points per game allowed to opposing wide receivers. I think a lot of that was just teams being more willing to run the ball and not have to worry about even throwing it that often against them. As we saw when they faced the Bills last week, Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis both went for 100 with relative ease. So if they're going to play all that man coverage on Jalen Waddle, I do think it could be a little problematic, especially with the way the Dolphins do a great job of always having Waddle in movement when the ball is snapped. So bottom 12 defense, EPA per play, and QB rating to targets in the slot specifically. I do think Waddle continues to warrant low-end wide receiver 2, maybe higher-end wide receiver 3 consideration. And for the elephant in the room, unfortunately, we have Mike Gesicki disappoint last week with the goose egg. I do want to point out that not even Mike Gesicki considers himself a tight end. I got some cool audio from one of my lovely Twitter followers where it was on National Tight End Day. One of his teammates comes over, daps up Mike. He's like, National Tight End Day. Hell yeah, man. Great catch. And Mike Gesicki just goes more like National Big Slot Receiver Day. So even Mike Gesicki himself doesn't believe himself to be a real tight end. But you know who does? Every single fantasy football website across the industry. So we'll keep rolling with it for that reason. Devontae Parker, Will Fuller, both seemingly continue to be sidelined, allowing Gesicki to have this role and work as a top 2 pass game option in this offense. So yes, it sucks that he goose egg last week. People still played 81% of the snaps, still had 7 targets. I'm inclined to more or less forget it happened. We have Tua and Jacoby throwing the ball. I understand it's not ideal. With that said, it didn't hold him back the previous, 8 weeks of the year. We didn't. He had the goose egg in week 1 as well. Only had 3 targets in that one. So at least we have the usage working in his right direction this time around. So that's all I got with the Dolphins. Dwayne, here we go, man. Jets. We got some shitty matchups on here, but at least we got Michael Carter continuing to emerge as an RB that we can feel pretty good about in Fantasyland.
Yeah, with Carter, a little bit of a bummer last week just with Tevin Coleman getting involved because that took away carries from Ty Johnson. And for taking carries away from Ty Johnson, they awarded him with a long down and distance in the 2-minute offense, which previously had been, with, our guy, Michael Carter. So look, you're still going to use him. He's fine. He came through with a touchdown late in the game. But just realize, if Coleman stays involved and if that is going to be his role and that's, how it's going to cascade across, the 3 backs, it just makes each one of them more script dependent, right? It means Ty Johnson needs a big trailing script to be involved. Well, check. You play for the Jets. You're probably going to get that at some point in the game. But it also means that it can be a limiting factor for Michael Carter because he's really just the early down back. Now, they did still try to use him a little bit in the passing game, even on early downs. So that's a good thing. But you already brought up, earlier, with Mike White, he was fine checking the ball down. Will we continue to get that, whenever we get Zach, Wilson back? I don't know. Like, we may not, because Wilson really was more about pushing the ball down the field. And so it's going to be a situation that we'll have to monitor. But overall, yeah, we're still going to use him. Right now, this week, I've got him at RB 21 right now. So just ahead of Josh Jacobs, ahead of Cordarrelle Patterson, ahead of Antonio Gibson. So right there in that range, that's about where I think he deserves to be. You know, he doesn't have an every down role. He's got a solid role. He's going to get some touches, but game script could kind of make things wacky for him. So we'll have to keep an eye
I think
on
I
it.
would like legit bump him down behind those three guys, maybe one more if we go to Zach Wilson instead of Mike White. It's been egregious, man, with how much Mike White checks it down.
Yeah. So, yeah, and I agree. Like, you could, and that's the thing. That's why I like to tier guys, right? Because I like to give people an idea of, like, this is a group of players, and here's why I feel about them as a group. Because, you know, as much as we try, Ian, like nailing down every player and we want to be accurate, and there's a lot that goes into the way we do our rankings, but it really is about groups of players, right? And it's about, like, here's why these, like, 5 are similar, right? Because
I don't know, Dwayne. I think this is the week I get every single ranking for every single position right. This is it. 100%.
Hey, I'm all for it, man. I'm all for it. I'll do a victory lap with you. Like, I will steamroll Twitter with Ian victory laps whenever you hit it out of the park this weekend. Not comfortable with Zach Wilson, even if he comes back, so I'm not going to talk about that. I don't think most of the listeners are going to be interested in using Zach Wilson unless you're in a, 24,352 Superflex league. You might be using Zach Wilson this weekend, and it's still TBD, right? Saleh has come out and said he's not naming his starter yet, so it could actually still be Mike White for one more week. My guess is that it will actually be Wilson. We'll have to see. As far as the receivers go, Corey Davis, I've got him at 32 right now, Ian. He's in my 4th tier. And then in my 5th tier, I have Elijah Moore just slightly behind him. And that's just because, Davis is out there for more of the routes. But, let's be honest, Elijah Moore is really the one that's come through with the big plays. We're just hoping to see some increased usage for him. We all love Keelan Cole. I'll be sending Keelan Cole a Christmas card, personal from the family and everything. But I just want to see more Elijah Moore. Like, that's what I want to see. Just because, like, it's like you get these players that, like, every week are coming up with a big play. Yeah, there's been a blown coverage, also mixed in there. But that happens for everybody. Not everybody. But, hey, the way I look at it is if you're a good player and you're doing enough things right, eventually you put yourself in position to get lucky sometimes too. So Elijah Moore's got that going for himself. But just when you watch him, Ian, like, he's the best player on the Jets. Like, when I watch him play, like, it's just like, this guy has – definitely got the biggest playmaking ability, got the most electricity. Is he fully polished yet? No, but I'm just ready to see him continue to get the ball more. So I'll have him down, in my wide receiver 4 boom bust. It could come through and, be a top 24 receiver for you. But if it is the week where the targets don't come and the routes are down, yeah, it's going to be a situation where you're like, oh, crap, thanks. I got 4 points from Elijah Moore. I think Corey Davis, the ranges are a little bit tighter on him. You're probably talking like worst case scenario, you get 8 to 10 points. I don't think the upside is quite as high, though, with Corey Davis. So both of them do have a decent matchup, though. 6.7 out of 10 on the wide receiver strength of schedule. That's 7th best on the slate. But the wide receiver cornerback matchups themselves, a little bit tougher. We haven't seen the Dolphins be what they've been, in the past. And that's part of why you're seeing, that metric show up. But it could be something where we start to see them, just play better, get healthier. We'll have to see. We'll have to wait. As far as tight ends, there's nothing to really talk about there. So that's it for the Jets.
With Elijah Moore, like, I just don't understand why he's still working behind even Jamison Crowder, who's fine. Like, I'm not hating on Crowder. The Jets made Crowder take a pay cut this offseason, which I thought was ridiculous from the start. He's been one of their only, like, consistent producers over the past few years. It's not like the Jets are, like, out there spending enough money to really be pressed up against the cap in the first place. But if you're going to make him take that pay cut, then you're going to pick Elijah Moore 34th, like 2 picks away from being a first-round pick. And now you're playing him behind the guy you had to take a pay cut. Dwayne, I'm not an NFL coach, and maybe that's the reason why I'd be playing Elijah Moore over Jamison Crowder. But I just can't wrap my mind around some of these decisions. But it is what it is. I agree with all the fantasy ranks. Saints at the Eagles. Philly sitting as a 1.5 point favorite. Opened actually with New Orleans as a 3.5 point favorite. Line moving all over the place in this one. Game total is down to a week low, 43.5 after opening at 48. So Haven't heard specifically if it's going to be Trevor Siemian again. And I agree with kind of what I've seen the consensus narrative be on Siemian from Sean Payton, from media members in New Orleans. Like, Siemian isn't the problem. He did a good job bringing them back last week. He's done a good job bringing them back every week. Only Tom Brady somehow has a higher PFF passing grade in the fourth quarter than Trevor Siemian. But the other guys say the same thing after talking about how Siemian isn't the problem. It's that they don't have enough weapons. So how could you expect Siemian to really elevate everyone when they don't have enough weapons? And I don't. But we also know the weapons aren't really improving anytime soon. Michael Thomas isn't coming back. Alvin Kamara is out of the picture, at least for the time being. So if Siemian isn't the problem and it's the pieces, and you know that the pieces aren't going to elevate them, what are we doing here? Let's get Taysom Hill in there and just try to be a different, unique offense and run the ball. So I just, again, don't really understand what we're doing with Siemian, because it seems like you at least have a potential untapped ceiling with Taysom Hill, whereas we know what we're getting here with Siemian and these weapons, and it's honestly not much. You can stay competitive against just about anyone, make them play an ugly game, maybe mess around and win a couple games. They beat the Buccaneers. They almost beat the Titans. Like, they're not a bad football team by any stretch of the imagination. I just don't get the fascination, the fixation over Taysom Hill for literally like the better part of the last half decade, only to suddenly play Trevor Siemian ahead of him when you don't have Jameis, when you don't have Drew Brees. But that's what they're doing. So because of that, Deontay Harris, Marquez Callaway, Traquan Smith, I think they're all reduced just to kind of wide receiver 5 darts. I mean, wide receiver 4 if you want to be generous, not guys that you're going to feel good about putting in any single starting fantasy football roster. So really things are just spread out between them. Your guess is as good as mine in terms of which one will score during any given week. Adam Troutman, we mentioned on the waiver pod, like, the usage has been going the right direction. Would really be careful about this next week though, everyone, because we've seen the drops play a factor already this year. And I just say that in terms of he hasn't exactly built himself like this super long leash, in my opinion, at tight end. And for him to basically not lose the game straight up, you know, it's was 1 2-point conversion they would have needed to tie it, but to have that false start, like, he ended it, that's for sure. So don't want to mess around with Troutman this week. And because of that, once again, only the running backs matter in New Orleans. So Kamara, obviously, if he's healthy, we're starting him with confidence. And we need to do the same thing with Mark Ingram. RB8 last week in relief, played over 80% of the offensive snaps. Look good as a rusher, look good as a receiver. I did not expect in the year 2021 for soon-to-be 32-year-old Mark Ingram to be out there handling a 3-down role. Saints are apparently okay with it. So, Dwayne, where do you have Ingram? Because I wrote down he should probably be a top 15 option. I understand if you got some other guys around there, but at a minimum, he needs to be top 20, firmly in that RB2 range.
If Alvin Kamara doesn't play, like, I'll have him at 13 or 14.
Okay, cool. That's what I was
we're still kind of waiting to see what's going to happen with Kamara. No real update on that front yet. But yeah, I think he deserves to be right there, borderline RB1. You know, he was heavily involved in the passing game last week. I mean, he was an every down back. Like, he had short down distance, all of it. And he knows their offense. Like, and when you look at Sean Payton, he trusts them. He trusts, Mark Ingram. So it was kind of funny because I was like, sometimes you get tagged in like these like questions, like who to start, like, and there's a poll and they tag a bunch of people. And there was one last week, we can't answer all those, but I try to jump in, where I can. I think the question was Javonte Williams or Mark Ingram. And I'm like, Mark Ingram all the way. I think you may have even been tagged in the same one. And it's the same thing. Like, he's just, you're going to have a player that's going to be out there 75% of the snaps. You're going to see, probably somewhere between 8 and 15%, of the targets, and he's going to get 60 to 70% of the rushing attempts. So now Ty Montgomery was probably going to be a little more involved in that game before he broke his finger, and where it was pointing completely the wrong direction. That could have derailed Mark Ingram a little bit last week from what we thought his role was going to be. But now heading into this week, I feel really good about him if we do have Kamara inactive.
Now, Dwayne, with the Eagles, it looks like Miles Sanders is going to be back. I saw Jared Evans, our PFF, lovely social media guru. And basically, I think it was like from an Instagram or something, but Miles Sanders was a picture of himself saying like that he is back. So This brings up a lot of questions because with Miles Sanders in weeks 1 through 7, the Eagles threw the ball on 67% of their plays in non-garbage time situations. That was the 5th highest pass play rate in the league. But over the past 3 weeks without Miles Sanders, they are dead last at just 40.6%. So, Dwain, what are we doing with these running backs if Sanders is back? Do we think they're going to go back to passing it? Because that doesn't really seem likely. But then again, if they keep running it, do we really think Sanders is all of a sudden going to take over this role? Or are we looking at just a 4-back committee straight from hell?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to see them continue to run it because they're winning, right? And they've actually had a game mixed in here where they were behind by 4 or more points for over 50% of the snaps, and they still stuck with the run. So really what we're seeing them now evolve to is they really want to be the old version of the Ravens offense, right? They want to run the ball, anywhere from 55 to 60% of the time. Jalen Hurts obviously helps make that possible because he's second in the league in design rushing attempts for quarterbacks. At 23% of the attempts from the Eagles go through through Hurts's legs. So I think it's a situation where, you kind of hit it like the Eagles have run the ball on 69%, 58%, and 59% of their plays over the last 3 games. That's freaking nuts. Like that's insane. Like when I first saw it, I was like, this has to be a typo. Like this isn't even possible. That's what we're dealing with. I think it'll be closer to like 55% as the games are more competitive, right? Overall, but still 55 to 60% rushing is like huge. Like you'll usually get 1 or 2 teams in the league every year that will do that. And it's usually the Ravens. We used to see the Seahawks do it back in the day. We saw the Panthers do it back in the day. And some teams just get some really good efficiency and they kind of get their mojo going. And that's really kind of where the Eagles are right now. They're looking pretty good, actually, despite the fact they're not throwing the ball as much. They're much more efficient with it. We saw it happen for Devonta Smith last week. But real quick with the backs, yeah, man, with Miles Sanders back, I actually wrote about it in the utilization report, which came out today. And, I actually think he's an interesting buy low, Ian, just because here's why. Most people value him as a running back 3 right now. So my thought is, even if he doesn't come back and get the every down role, which he probably won't, right? If he doesn't come back and get the every down role, the increased size of the pie that we have with the Eagles right now is probably going to give him just as many carries as he was getting before when he was the every down back, because they weren't throwing it to him and they weren't running enough to really get his stats up to where we needed them to be, despite the fact he was on the field the whole time. But if by some chance he does carve out a bigger portion, or if he does go back to being a near every down player in this offense, man, that would be a sky high ceiling. Then we would be talking about Miles Sanders every week in the top 12. So that's the way I look at it. You go buy low now. Worst case is he stays in a committee, but the pie's big enough. He probably gives you what he was already giving you, and you can, and remember, the key is you're paying an RB3 price. Don't go overpay. If you have to overpay, just don't do it. But if you can get him for the price of what an RB3 should be, and then all of a sudden, like something happened, and look, injuries, we've seen it how many times this year. For all we know, Jordan Howard gets hurt next week. Not that we want him to, but if that happens, okay, all of a sudden that's more carries for Miles Sanders. If Boston Scott is out, I think what will happen is it's going to be Sanders really playing Boston Scott's role that he has right now. Then I think it's going to be Jordan Howard staying in the role he's in, and we probably see Gainwell continue to do what he's doing, and it'll be Boston Scott that's the odd player out. Or you could see Boston Scott take over Kenneth Gainwell's spot, right, and it ends up being Gainwell being the odd player out. So it's going to be some version of those things, but I think there are paths for Miles Sanders that could just include luck, right, that all of a sudden you're in this heavy rushing attack with a player that we know does have talent. Is he the best at reading his blocks and all those things? No. But if you're going to get volume like you're getting in this offense, I would love to see this thing just turn into Miles Sanders and Jalen Hurts. Like then we would be in a really good spot with it because there is enough rushing volume there to really, get you through.
But Dwain, I think like the way you described kind of the process of buying low on someone is perfect here, because Sanders, it wasn't like he was just busting with a bunch of opportunity early on. He was only the RB 38 in expected PPR points per game in weeks 1 through 7. Like he just wasn't getting the rock. So some of the other guys we've named as buy low candidates, like over the past month or so, Javonte Williams, Chase Edmonds, Josh Jacobs. I'm not saying they've all, been complete smashes or anything, but each time it was like, okay, buy them. them as the RB3 that they are. And if you continue to have that production, okay, you got an RB3. You're not killing yourself over it. You're feeling good enough about that. But the potential for so much more is evident inside their respective offenses. So with Sanders, you're fine if he's on the squad. Maybe you're not getting this top 15 guy that someone drafted them to be, but you didn't pay that for him. You paid for him as an RB3, and God forbid they give him this backfield. All of a sudden, we're looking at a hell of a lot more.
Yeah, and you're not trading for him to even get him in your lineup this week. Unless you're just absolutely strapped, then you may throw him in there as a what the heck kind of player. Yeah. But yeah, I agree with everything you just said. So that's kind of like the process, the way you want to think about it. Okay, what's the worst case that can happen here? What's the best case? I think the worst case is you still get the production you had before. It's just coming through a different way, right? It's not an every down back thing. So it's just the bigger pie. As far as the receivers go, man, we did have Dallas Goedert get injured last week, with a concussion, so he left the game. We'll have to keep an eye on him. But his utilization has continued to look great. It was just an injury thing. So he'll be fine. And what we like is it has really condensed around just Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert over the past several games. And what's been nice, Ian, is even though we're not getting all that passing volume we were before, we're just seeing more efficiency out of the offense. So it's just really creating, a different way that defenses are having to start thinking about the Eagles. But if you look at Devonta Smith, man, he's really kind of turned into a target funnel, 38% and 27% of the targets over the last 2 games. So that underlying wide receiver 2 utilization has really been there all year. It's just been now he's kind of starting to blossom and bloom. He has struggled, surprisingly. And I actually went back and started watching these just because it kind of was throwing me off. But against press man single coverage early in the season, he had only been open 23% of the time. But what we've seen over these last couple of games, he's actually been improving. And last week, man, he really overcame those demons, because if you look at Sunday, he had 4 looks like that. 3 of them he got open, 4 receptions, 66 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So even the one that he didn't get open, his quarterback didn't care and still got him the ball. So that was really good to see that from Devonta Smith. And that's really what we expect from Smith, right? He's a good technician. He knows how to get a release off press on the line of scrimmage. He's a separator in the way that he runs his routes. So it also could just be he and Hurts are getting into more of a, to me, when I look at Devonta Smith, he's a timing receiver, right? He's going to be coming out of his break. He's going to create separation at the top of his route. You want to get the ball out and have it to him. It's not really, hey, I want to sit back here forever and be thinking about it a long time and try to throw it to him once I see he's open. He can do that, but really the strength of Devonta Smith's game is really the things that we're seeing them try to use him to do over these past couple of weeks. So I think that that's very encouraging. And if you look at, Smith on the week this week, I've got him just outside my top 24, Ian. I've got him at 26. So got him really, in that high end wide receiver 3 range. And then as far as the backs, man, I've got them all kind of mixed together in my 5th tier. If they're all going to be active, I'm going to try to avoid them. Unless we get more news or information telling us really what we think the pecking order is going to be. And then we'll obviously fine tune the ranks, as we go.
Bengals at the Raiders. We got Cincy now as a 1-point favorite. Actually opened with the Raiders as 4.5-point faves. Game total resting at 49.5. So mentioned this before. I forget what matchup we were talking about, but it was if the Bears were going to embrace cover 0 or not, even though we know that that's one of the things Lamar Jackson has really struggled with. Raiders did not change their philosophy to go try to do what Mahomes had been struggling with, and accordingly got absolutely torched. So the Raiders run more cover 3 than any other defense in the NFL, and it's not even close. It was over, I think, 100 coverage snap difference between them and the second place team, the Seattle Seahawks. So Joe Burrow this year against cover 3, 3rd in PFF passing grade, 12th in big time throw rate, and 4th in yards per attempt at 9.1. Giddy up Jamar Chase and giddy up T. Higgins, because Dwayne, in games with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, Higgins, not Chase, actually leads the way in targets. It's 57 versus 56, but that's kind of what we were expecting out of this offense, at least after we got a good wind of just how good Chase is that they are at the top. Unfortunately, Tyler Boyd, distant 3rd at just 35. He's the odd man out. It was a situation where I think we could have hope to see 1A, 1B, 1C. No, it's 1A Jamar Chase, but I think it's still 1A, 1B between him and Higgins. It's not as 1, 2, 3. I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers around there, everyone, as it might have looked like when Jamar Chase was just going off in the earlier parts of the season. We got to remember a lot of that was with Higgins' sideline. So I'm not saying Higgins is going to outperform Chase or anything. If you look at the air yards that were going along with those targets, Chase is the number one guy in Cincinnati, but I continue to think that the T. Higgins true breakout, comeback season, whatever you want to call it, it's more of a matter of when, not if. So in this spot, he's wide receiver 22 in expected points per game, only wide receiver 3 in realized. I do think we could see Higgins start to get back on that regression train in the right direction. So start Chase, start Higgins. Boyd, I think if you're in a pinch, you can treat him as kind of like an upside wide receiver 4 at this point. And of course, our guy Joe Mixon, RB8 in PPR points per game, PFF's 4th highest graded running back as a rusher on the season. I get it. We got Samaje Perine, potentially more Chris Evans stealing away a little bit of work, but we are still seeing Mixon, I think almost in a similar manner as like Jonathan Taylor. They like throwing him the ball, even if he's not their explicit pass down, third down back at all, situations of every single game. So no, Mixon.
I do think that one's harder to trust just because they have so many weapons to feed, unlike Taylor. Like Taylor, like you could argue, like he's the second best person to throw to on the team. But for Mixon, he's probably more like 4th.
Right. And look, Taylor's a top 3 fantasy back. I think Mixon's like a borderline RB1 at this point. So I'm not trying to put them next to each other by any stretch. But when we see the Perine and potential for Chris Evans to get more involved, I would just say that, again, this isn't a situation where I think it's quite as dreadful as you can make it out to be. Last 3 full games that Mixon has had, 6 targets, 5 targets, and 5 targets. So I know when we have some of this stuff where it's a little bit less sticky than 2 minute, but we have seen him have. It was going into last week. I believe he was tied for 11th in first read targets among the running backs. Not the craziest stat, I get it, but we have seen them at least make an effort to get Mixon the ball one way or another, and hopefully he could be back to actually having a role a little bit closer to what he had in weeks 1 through 4 compared to weeks 6 through 9. Obviously, he was playing really banged up after suffering, I believe it was that knee injury 3 weeks or 4 weeks into the year. Could have been an ankle as well. So Joe Mixon, continue to get him in those starting lineups. Could be a sneaky big day for Joe Burrow. Obviously feeling great about Jamar Chase, and don't be shocked if T. Higgins starts to get back on track as well. And then with CJ Uzomah, I usually kind of put him towards the bottom of that kind of borderline tight end 1 tier that we always talk about, Dwayne. He's out there all the time. The problem is that there's a lot of mouths to feed there, and he is usually at the bottom of that pecking order. So unless he's converting, one of his 3 or 4 targets into a score, you're probably not going to be super happy with the product. Now with the Raiders, mention this, man. It has been rough over these last 2 weeks without Henry Ruggs. I know we saw Deshaun Jackson get in there and make a big catch. Wasn't exactly sure what to do once he caught the ball, but maybe he can help provide that lid-lifting presence for the offense in the future. We're going to need it because whatever they've been doing over the past 2 weeks has not been working.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're in a super deep format and like Jackson's available, like I'm trying to get him with just a little bit of fab this week. And the reason why, like these other receivers just can't, they're not doing it, Ian. Like they're not able to win outside. When you look at Bryan Edwards, in his single man press coverage this year, not good. If you look at him just in single man alone, like he's only getting open 28% of the time. That's well below the league averages. And look, it's just something we've seen when you watch Edwards. Like he's not a great separator. And Derek Carr, let's be honest, it could be a fit thing. It may not all be on Bryan Edwards. Derek Carr is not really someone that wants to throw a bunch of contested balls, right? He prefers to throw to the player that's open, and that's fine. Like that's Derek Carr's thing. That's like what he feels good doing. And I just think Deshaun Jackson, of all the receivers on the roster other than Hunter Renfrow, who gets to work underneath from the slot, is the guy that probably could give him, some of that mojo as far as actually creating separation down the field. He did not get to play enough last week, only 12% of the snaps, but he was targeted on 20% of the routes that he ran, and I do expect that will grow. I don't think that Deshaun Jackson is ever going to be a 90% route player on this team, but I think he could get to 60 to 70% and really be the main target when he's on the field in situations where, they're trying to stretch it. So we'll see what happens with Jackson. Now, he could also immediately immediately get an abdominal strain and be done for the season. And then you'll just be back, thanks, Dwain. That's why I'm not telling you like go spend like a lot, but 1 or 2% if you've got a spot on your roster that you can just churn. There's a player that you don't really care about sitting there. And you can just move on next week if we don't see him get a little bit more work. But this is more about an indictment on the other receivers. It's less about Jackson at this point in his career and just like looking at the rest of the team. And they need something, Ian. They need something. Teams are doubling up on Waller now. He's seeing help and a lot of coverage. Waller's utilization is great. Routes 90%, 86% over the last 2 weeks. Targets per route run, 26%, 17%. Target shares, 25%, 19%. Like heck, like this is one of the few tight ends that nearly leads his team. Actually does lead his team in air yards now that Ruggs is off of the team. End zone targets, 32%. He's the guy they look to on 3rd and 4th down. Like Darren Waller's getting everything. It's just been a little bit of a struggle because teams are really focused on trying to take him away. So they need something else. And I think Jackson is the player that could potentially give you that. As far as Derek Carr this week, I do have him right now ranked just outside my top 12. You guys have already heard me talk about this a couple times on the show. There's some players that I'm playing around with, including Justin Fields, Kirk Cousins. But I think Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, Justin Fields all kind of belong right there in that tier probably for me together. I do think that there's a sneaky chance that this is a shootout game. We know the Bengals can get things going on offense. And Derek Carr, like really whenever you look at him, even, once we've lost Henry Ruggs, like he still hasn't been terrible. He's just one of those, he is truly what I call like that high end 2 quarterback that gives you, a weekly quarterback. He could give you a spike week, right? He comes up with some of these big plays. He's a very accurate passer. And so when you look at him over the last few weeks, he's finished as quarterback 14, 18, and then 8. He started off the season much hotter. Ian and I were pretty high on him. He was 9, 8, and 11. Hit a rough patch there, right, where he was 24 and 31, but then 12, 14, 18, and 8. So he can still get it done. I think this is a potential spot where you get a shootout. It's tough because we don't really love the receiving options, but that kind of takes me back to the thing with Deshaun Jackson. As far as the ground game with Josh Jacobs, I've got him ranked this week in right at running back 21 right now. So in that tier 4 that we talked about earlier, right around Michael Carter, Cordarrelle Patterson, Antonio Gibson, got all of those guys right there together. Could see Alex Collins sneak in just behind them if we get another week with Chris Carson out, because we didn't see, Penny last week, for the Seahawks. So that's where I'm at on Jacobs. Got a pretty good matchup. Running back strength of schedule is a 7.3 out of a 10. And so that's 6th best on the slate this week. Got a above average offensive line run blocking advantage this week as well. And obviously, whenever we talk about the Bengals, they're giving up 28.6 PPR points per game. 2 backs. Now we know Jacobs will share the backfield, but what was encouraging is over these last couple of weeks, he has been out there in a little bit more routes. They're throwing the ball a little bit more on the early downs. Kenyon Drake is still coming out and getting the long down and distance work, 2-minute offense. And then Jalen Richard, he's also working in. Jalen Richard's kind of like this fly that's flying around right now. And I don't want to slam anything really loudly in because I know like when you bang the table, like, we've had some complaints that we may cause an auto accident. So I don't want to do the fly swatter really loud, but that's basically, that's Jalen Richard. Like he's just the fly that's annoying everybody. He's doing just enough to make it kind of still a little bit from Jacob, still a bit from Kenyon Drake. But I will say with Drake, like his role is more back to what it was early in the season. We got to a point there where it's like, what the heck? Like, what are we doing with Kenyon Drake? We can just drop him. At this point, I do think he is more in that, think of him as a passing down back, right? You get in the right kind of script, you can get a little bit out of Drake. The problem is it's kind of a tight needle to thread because they could also want to, in that scenario, which he gets the most value out of, he kind of gets capped because Jalen Richard does get used a little bit more. But Richard's usage has come down, so I feel a little bit better about Drake. I'll have him in my tier 5, so he'll probably be like around running back 40. I don't even have a number next to him yet. I haven't gotten that far down my list. Not going to use any of these receivers this week. Jackson's just a wait and see thing. Folks, Waller is Waller. I already kind of highlighted what's going on with him and why he's having some of the challenges, but the utilization is still elite, and you just have to lean into it. Like you don't get tight ends that get to run as many routes, that get as many targets as Darren Waller. It's eventually going to come through for you. I've had multiple tweets to me, because I have the Darren Waller buy low a few weeks back. What the F is going on with Darren Waller? So, look, he got hurt, guys. Like he came back week 9 and he gave you a 4 spot. Yeah, I get it. This last week he gave you a 20. So there are struggles, but man, I'm just telling you, like it's hard for me to name many tight ends despite all this that I'm starting over Darren Waller. I can name for you Travis Kelce, maybe Kyle Pitts, but even then, like right now, I have Waller ranked second in my ranks for the week, ahead of George Kittle, ahead of Mark Andrews. Then I got Pitts. Then I got Gesicki after that right now.
I mean, Waller caught a 10-yard touchdown last week.
Got called back.
Unfortunately,
Yep.
there was a holding penalty that had to nullify it. So with you, 100%. Except for the fly thing, I can't relate. You know, I don't like to brag that much on here, but I really am one of the best fly swatters in the entire world, and they just don't really come around my
make a
resume
noise with it
anymore. Oh yeah, I am, dude. You give me that. It's one shot, one kill with me. It only takes one. It's just.
Well, it only takes me
man.
one shot, but it's going to be really loud.
I mean, you know, it's. I
You
can't
just
relate.
hear a random. Okay, cool.
So sorry,
got
man.
the green light from Hartitz here.
McFarland problems, man. I don't know. I don't see the flies anymore. I don't know if they talk to each other or what, but they know if they come through. You know, maybe it's because after I usually after I kill a fly, I like to let it kind of sit there for a while, let the other flies know what's going to happen if you roll through. So just something to keep in mind.
Good strategy. I'll use that. I like to just have dead flies laying around on my desk.
Yeah, so we'll have the answer to why this podcast went well over 2 hours. Oh, you know, we had to get through our fly swatting discussion amongst other incredibly important topics. Cowboys at the Chiefs, Kansas City, 2.5-point favorite, opened at 7.5. Public quickly just decided that was ridiculous. Game total is at 56. Dak Prescott has been lethal this year when throwing the ball in more than 2.5 seconds. You cannot give this guy time. 4th highest PFF passing grade, number 1 QB rating, 2nd most passing touchdowns, number 4 in yards per attempt. It adds up, Dwayne. I love when metrics do this. You know, everyone talks about analytics. Oh, this one's bad because of this or that. How about when something you find matches what you see on the film? Can't give Dak too much time. Receivers too good, Dak's too good, line's too good. I love it. Makes sense. And Kansas City, don't look now, might actually be equipped to preventing what the Cowboys do best, and that is giving Dak all sorts of time. Number 6 in quick pressure rate this year. That's defined as getting pressure in fewer than 2.5 seconds. That's usually that threshold we're using based on the average release point. So if Tyron Smith, who has missed these last 2 weeks with the ankle injury, is not in the picture, keep an eye on how quickly Dak is forced to get rid of that ball. Again, this Cowboys offense looks and I think is the best unit in the league when they're at full health. When we have seen them have some problems, it's been because Dak, I think, a little bit too worried about when that pressure is going to get there. So something to keep an eye out on that. Maybe it's Zeke week because that can be another way to slow down that pass rush. As we know, Chiefs, bottom 6 in PFF team rushing grade, yards before contact per attempt, yards per carry, period. This is just truly a bad run defense. So I think Zeke, Pollard to a lesser extent. I mean, Pollard has these good weeks now and then, but ultimately you look at his finishes over the course of the year, far more outside the top 30 than inside the top 30. So Pollard, I think he is a solid mid-low end RB3. Zeke, we're continuing to fire up inside our top 12 weekly running backs. They've always been playing a little bit banged up, but I think the overall lack of touches last week, more so just a result of them blowing the hell out of the Falcons and not really needing to force the issue. And we're feeling amazing about CeeDee Lamb and good about Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup. So wouldn't, be Cooper does this. He has a couple quote-unquote down weeks, and we only need to go back 3 weeks ago to find the last time he had over 100 and a tutty. So liked what we saw out of Gallup last week. Dwayne, we talked about Dalton Schultz quite a bit on the review pod, so I'll kind of save most of that. But basically, when Gallup is back, we see Schultz take a true backseat and be this offense's number 4 at best pass game option. So I really think let's think, Dwayne. Dan Arnold, we're starting him ahead of Dalton Schultz, right?
Yeah.
Dawson Knox? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the tier. That's where you put him. Yeah. Dawson Knox, Arnold.
He's
Schultz.
in that tier now. He used to be a couple spots ahead of that tier, and now he's not. We yanked it away. Sorry, Dalton, but that's just, that's life in the big city.
Just more mouths to feed, man. His targets per route run have really come down. The other thing is, he's getting a little more attention, right, from defenses too. Yeah. So that happens.
Now, with the Chiefs, Dwayne, it looks like Clyde Edwards-Helaire will be back in action. Andy Reid said he's hopeful that he will be suiting up this Sunday. I would really like to take a Philly look at this situation if possible, where let it play out, let's see what happens, and then we'll get back to maybe starting a guy in the next week. Because Dwayne, before Clyde got hurt, we talked about how his expected points really were terrible. This guy has 10 targets all season long. Darrell Williams had 9 targets on Sunday night. So maybe they completely changed the way they're featuring him. But for right now, I wouldn't be shocked if Darrell maybe doesn't lead the way, but continues to be annoyingly involved enough, particularly in the pass game, to basically render each guy almost like in the Denver Bronco RB3 category.
Yeah, so I approach Clyde Edwards-Helaire kind of the same way we talked about with Miles Sanders, and here's why. It totally could happen, right? What you just talked about, but it's not like Clyde was really doing a lot before, so his price tag isn't going to be super high. Obviously, if you've got a fantasy manager that's held on this long, right, and they're just ready to get him back in the lineup, but I promise you right now, they're not that ready to get him back in the lineup. They don't trust him. Would be my guess. Because I know it would be tough for me to trust him, especially if we didn't dig into all the things that we dig into here. But I think the potential upside for Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the fact that, the Chiefs have figured out, and we saw that this last week, that they have to continue. They got to check the ball down. They got to make defenses eventually take that away. If you looked at it last week, actually I wrote this down for some research I was doing earlier, and I didn't even put it in the utilization report. But if you looked at the way the Chiefs attacked, the Raiders defense and what they did and the types of covers they faced. Were you just
flipping over pages? You handwrite notes.
Yeah, I do have some handwritten notes.
That is such a waste of time, Dwayne. How are you ever going to look? You can Control F a Word doc and find it in 5 seconds.
Yeah, it's okay.
2 seconds.
It's okay. Like for certain things, like when I'm in Ultimate and I got to write it down and look at it, like I like to chart it out.
Type it. No.
Yeah. Dude, hey, I learned my way. Come on, Ian. I want to make
I'm trying to get Dwayne more family time for Mrs. McFarland and your road showing around, and you writing down notes is screwing that up.
Most everything I have is automated, but I still like to have my notepad. It's my comfort area. It's like where I scratch my stuff out. But
you're gonna apologize to me in 12 months and tell me that you've changed it. But I'm sorry for cutting you off. Please continue.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. But cover one, cover zero, all of those things increased as the game went on. If you looked at the game early on and the amount of quarters coverage, that they were seeing, the cover six, all of these, really trying to take the big throws and everything away from the Chiefs offense. In the first quarter, it was 22%, quarters, 15% cover six. By the time you got to the fourth quarter, right, and all these checkdowns and things were happening, that number was down to 14% and 6.5%. So slowly through the game, you saw this deterioration of all these, everybody playing deep against Mahomes. So I think they're trying to obviously offset the fact that using too high and all these different looks, nobody wants to let them do that. So it's Andy Reid's really trying to program it into Mahomes. Look, you got to take these checkdowns. And so kind of where I'm going with this is if Edwards-Helaire does take back over the lead role, right, he could all of a sudden be in the role that we all thought would make him valuable as a fantasy asset, and that is the receiving game. And we have seen him do that before. We have not seen it be super consistent. So it could be a situation like you're talking about where it's really just more of a rotation and they could continue to, take away from each other, and they're neither backs that we want to use. But I would still put, my chip on the player with the draft capital. He's just got to stay healthy. So he's a player that I think you can buy low, right? And it's a situation where it could really improve over the next several weeks. But the key is you don't have to pay a lot, right, to get Clyde Edwards-Helaire. If it's somebody that still values Clyde Edwards-Helaire, like the mid-second round pick they made, back in August, well, fine. You're not going to get Clyde Edwards-Helaire from them, right? You're not going to be willing to pay that price to make the deal. But if it's someone that's more realistic, more clear-eyed, and maybe you can find a situation where you've got a strength that they need, that you want the running back depth, then Edwards-Helaire is a player that I would look at trying to stash just because of this is the adaptation that we're seeing from their offense. And if you look at the last 3 weeks, Darrell Williams' target share is 15%, 11%, 20% routes, 67%, 40%, 55%. So Edwards-Helaire is perfectly capable of playing that role as well. Not saying he will, but there is that opportunity. And with the shift we've seen in this offense, because that's really been the problem, Ian. It was okay, it's a pass-first offense. You get some early down work. Okay, well, what does that equal? You're hoping for 10 carries? Well, now if all of a sudden the backs are involved in the passing game because they need a third option outside of Travis Kelce and out of Tyreek Hill to really make this whole thing work and to really get those defenses to really start to come up, into the box to give you the shots later in the game that you can hit for the big plays that Mahomes, we know that's really all Mahomes wants, is to set those things up for later in the game. And so I think there could be some upside with Clyde Edwards-Helaire if that happens. Your point, though, it could just be a complete, our running back by committee. So don't overpay. Very similar to what we talked about with Miles Sanders.
I like buying low on him. I like everything you said. I just don't want to start him this week. Let's find out which one of us is right.
Don't want to start him. Go on bigger strategy picture, than just the start sit question. But yeah, no, I'm with you. So as far as where I've got him in the ranks, I do have him just slightly above Darrell Williams, but I don't think it's a situation where, you come back in week one And they're going to really give Clyde Edwards the full load. I've got him in my fourth tier. So I've got him down there by like Gibson, Alex Collins, and Collins is assuming Chris Carson's out right now. Devonta Freeman, J.D. McKissick, all those guys. And then I've got just the tier below, I've got Darrell Williams down there next to Mark Ingram, Ramondre Stevenson, Dearness Johnson, that group, right? So you've got another back coming back for most of those. Maybe they continue to get a little bit more work. So we'll have to see. And we'll have to monitor this. We'll see how healthy is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. It could be something where these two guys flip-flop by the time we get to the end of the week. Either way, I don't like it, Ian. If they're going to both be active in this first game, I'd rather just kind of sit back and see what we have. That's the way I'd like to approach it. As far as Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, you guys know their stats. You don't need me to really tell you that. So you're going to use them. Hill doesn't really matter what his matchup is. You really don't care. You just throw your hands up. It's going to be a shootout game. You got a total of 56, implied points 29.25. Like you're just gonna run with it. Kelce obviously fits into the same part of that conversation. I have Patrick Mahomes as my QB3 on the week. I have Dak Prescott as my 5, so I love both.
Cardinals at the Seahawks actually opened Seattle -3.5. That's flipped all the way to Arizona -2.5. Game total at 49.5. Top 2 running backs, they are tied. Most fantasy points above expectation. Jonathan Taylor and James freaking Conner. The guy has been great with his opportunities all year long. This is not a situation where Chase Edmonds managers can even really complain because Conner has just been that good with his opportunities. He will continue to be a locked-in RB1 for however long Edmonds is sidelined with this ankle injury. But like even before Edmonds was out, man, Conner's been a top 24 RB in 6 of the last 8 games that he has been out there. So absolutely crushing it. And now the floor is just higher than ever. I mean, the fact that Conner didn't bust last week when the Cardinals couldn't even, I think, climb to 200 total yards of offense tells you all you need to know. Throwing the Seahawks being the league's second worst defense in PPR points per game allowed to position. And you don't need me to tell you to start James Conner in fantasy lineups of all shapes and sizes. Elsewhere, man, it's just rough because this offense is really a shell of itself without Kyler Murray. It seemed like he's getting closer to come back. He practiced last Friday. It was a game time decision, but Cliff Kingsbury again kind of declined to truly just say like, hey, Kyler is going to be out there. And I believe, as I pull it up, I believe their bye is actually next week. So it really could be until week 13 that we see Kyler, that we see Hopkins back in action. Yeah, their bye is in week 12. So something to keep in mind with that, because this offense without Kyler, man, it just becomes like the complete horizontal rate. This is no air yards going on with Colt McCoy. 5.9 yard average target depth. The only guy more throwing the ball in a lower target depth, Andy freaking Dalton this year. So Kyler Murray is at 8.4, which ranks 18th out of 43 qualified quarterbacks. So AJ Green, we have seen when they don't have DeAndre Hopkins on the outside, Green just cannot separate, cannot get open on his own. And when he is now relied on as the lead outside guy, he can't make that happen. Christian Kirk can make it happen, but it's just not that great that he's not getting the same sort of fantasy-friendly targets that I think he was seeing with Kyler Murray. Rondale Moore last week, just 33% of the snaps. And you might say, well, Ian, that's because he was coming back from a concussion and neck injury and it was a game-time decision. Then what's he out there to begin with, man? It's not an ankle. It's your neck or it's your brain. Let's not go and put this guy out there for a limited amount of snaps and say, oh, we're trying to keep him healthy. If you're truly worried about his neck and brain, he shouldn't be out there in the first place. But certainly can't play Rondale right now. So James Conner starting with all the confidence in the world. Christian Kirk, I think, deserves upside wide receiver 3 treatment. Otherwise, I am good with this offense, assuming Kyler and Hopkins are going to be out. Dwayne, Russ came back last week, was not cooking. And it was unfortunate, man. Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, number 1 and number 2 on the week in unrealized air yards. I admit that Russ did not look good. I mean, we could say that he is coming back, too early. Maybe he's not the same guy. At the same time, we can't really sit here and say we're benching Metcalf and Lockett.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the perfect, note with just talking about their unrealized air yards. I've got DK Metcalf as my wide receiver 9 this week. I really don't care. I've got Lockett as my 20. Look, these guys both carry boom bust every week, but the booms are really big. And so you can't try to pick weeks that you're going to use or not use them. Obviously with Metcalf, you're never going to do that. I know we have some folks that I get a lot of start sit questions with Tyler Lockett's name in them, so it's a normal thing. So I've got Metcalf at 9, Tyler Lockett at 20 right now. I put Tyler Lockett, in that range. I've got him below Brandon Cooks. but I got him right there with Mike Williams because that's kind of where we are with Mike Williams right now. And I've got him ahead of, like a Michael Pittman by just a little bit ahead of a Jalen Waddle. Like, I wouldn't argue if you wanted to start those two players over Tyler Lockett. Like, they're good in their own right, all in the same tier. But the bottom line is like Tyler Lockett can't be probably much further than like your wide receiver 24. He still should be in most starting lineups. Because believe me, you don't want to be the dude that's got Tyler Lockett on the bench whenever he does his 120 yards and 3 touchdowns thing. Like, you drafted him or you put him on the squad. Like, you need to have him out there unless you're just in a shallow format where you got a lot of other options. Russell Wilson I got at QB 11 for the week. It is a bit of a tough matchup this week against Arizona. It'd also be better if we did think it was going to be more of a shootout with a healthy Kyler. We may not get that. So this could be one of those games where it just kind of grinds to a halt. That's been the thing with the Seahawks, Ian, is we just don't get enough volume and it just continues to show through. Like, Shane Waldron was like the offensive coordinator I was the most excited about this offseason. Been a complete bummer. Who knows how much of his fault it is? It's probably Pete Carroll, really in his ear, driving a lot of these things. But like this is like a 1990s offense. Like, that's what we're back to with the Seahawks. It's like Pete Carroll's just like reliving the good old days, what things were like in the 90s. But I mean, it's like if you look at their first down run rate, like they're in the bottom 5. You look at how much they run the ball inside the 5, they're in the top 5. So it's a situation where they want to run the ball. They don't even really have good running backs. They want to slow the game down. They want to do all these things that like seem very, and it's not like Seattle's really built to do this stuff. Ian, this isn't, that's what's interesting to me with Pete Carroll. Like, does he think that he has the same does he think he has the same team that he had 10 years ago? Right, when he was winning Super Bowls, whenever he did win a Super Bowl and he had a good team every single year, right? He doesn't have the Legion of Boom. He doesn't have all those things that really enabled stylistically a lot of, the way he wanted to coach for those things to play out. So it is what it is, though, right now. So I will say with Alex Collins last week, we had Rashad Penny out of the mix, and it was really just him and Travis Homer. And Collins handled 91% of the rushing attempts. The way the game went, it didn't work out that 91% equaled a lot because they were getting smoked the whole time. But that is a positive development for him. So if for some reason we do have Chris Carson out again, I think we can depend on Alex Collins a little more than what we were going into the bye week. I'm going to put him, fringe low-end RB2. Ian, I know you've got low-end RB2. That market's cornered. So fringe low-end RB2 is where I would put Alex Collins this week. And then Gerald Everett, we talked about him on the Waiver Wire show, so I won't cover too much. But basically, he's taken that job over. They need a third option to really get things going to help loosen up coverage for the other two players. So he will be a mid-range tight end 2 this week. But if he hits, he gives you that low-end, tight end 1, mid-range tight end 1 upside.
Got some barks out of PFF Lily and Django the Chewini there. So never know, Dwayne. Gerald Everett week. Crazier things have happened. Real quick on the Russell Wilson thing, I read a really good article from Steven Ruiz, always doing awesome work at The Ringer. I know he's pals with Seth Galina and our Too High crew at PFF. But basically, Steven was breaking down just the difference with Russell Wilson, kind of why the marriage hasn't worked with Shane Waldron. And the big thing is that the offense Waldron wants to run is ideally supposed to consist of a lot of in-breaking routes, a lot of throws over the middle of the field. And that is where Russ historically just has not been down to target players. And you can say it's because he's shorter, lacks the confidence to throw these, timing throws in the tight windows. Whatever it is, he just hasn't been throwing consistently over the middle. So we've seen them almost abandon that idea here in recent weeks and just get back to the same offense they've been running for the better part of the last 10 years. So obviously easier to replace a play caller than it is to replace a franchise quarterback like Russ. You kind of wish they could have found a happier marriage though, because here we are and they are coming off scoring exactly 0 points. So make sure you go check out that. Again, great article by Mr. Ruiz over at theringer.com. Final 2 games, everyone. We got the Steelers at the Chargers. LAC sitting as 6-point favorites, opened as 2.5-point favorites. Game total at 47. A lot of COVID stuff going on here. Obviously, Big Ben on the Steelers side of the ball. But now we also got Joey Bosa and Jerry Tillery potentially out for this week on the Chargers defensive line. So obviously it would make things even easier for Najee Harris. This year, nobody has had a higher average depth of tackle than the Chargers, 4.68 yards on average behind the line of scrimmage, where where they are making that tackle. So with Najee, the usage is literally as good as anyone could hope for. He is averaging 22.5 expected PPR points per game. The only marks higher than that over the past 3 years were 2019 and 2020, Christian McCaffrey. I understand Najee does not have the same sort of efficiency. He's not as good as Christian McCaffrey, but we're still seeing a top 5, top 6 running back because volume means that much in fantasy land. Obviously, no Joey Bosa. That's going to be huge for the Steelers' attempt to establish that old run. Also got to look at Deontay Johnson. I'm not going to take away too much from the targets last week of Mason Rudolph under center. Deontay did still see 13 of them working as the number 1 guy. The 3 wide receiver set with Claypool out of the picture, Deontay, James Washington, and Ray McLeod. Also have Pat Freiermuth. Unfortunately, though, only 62% snaps. Ebron didn't come back into his normal role, but they also kept Zach Gentry also, heavily involved because, of course, you got to do that. So with Freiermuth, he still had 9 targets, but I'm wondering how much of that was Mason Rudolph throwing the ball 50 times and how much of that was Freiermuth still being a featured guy in the pass game. So I'm not worried about the fumble at the end of the game. I'm not worried about Freiermuth, not having the talent to make the most out of it. We're just looking at that opportunity, Dwayne, and at tight end, we got to hit certain numbers, and he is at risk of not hitting those as long as Ebron is going to be active. So Freiermuth, I think, if you want to be kind, you can put him in that Dan Arnold kind of that tight end 1 borderline tier we've talked about several times already. I might even put him 1 spot below that because, again, we just want a guy that's going to be out there for every single snap, and that's not Freiermuth right now with Eric Ebron back in action. So Deontay is the one that we keep saying it every week, hoping that he's going to really blow up, and he hasn't, and it doesn't really, it's not like he's killing us, man. He's still putting up big-time numbers. Going into last week, he was a wide receiver 11 in PPR points per game. As I pull up what he actually finished last week, what was he? Yeah, he was the wide receiver 12 last week, and it felt like it was a disappointment. So that's just the Deontay Johnson experience, but we're getting so many damn receptions that it doesn't matter if he's going to drop a ball here, fumble a ball there. So Chargers, yes, they're much worse against the run than they are the pass, but we've also seen Justin Jefferson and Devontae Smith show over the past 2 weeks that this is a secondary that can be had as well. So banged up. I think Deontay Johnson, Dwayne, you talked about seeing Tyler Lockett and a bunch of start-sit questions. I see Deontay in those as well. And it's no, you start Deontay every single week, no matter what. Continue to do so. Same thing with Najee. And that's all I got for the Steelers. Dwayne, let's talk some Chargers because I know it's been rough for our guy, Mike Williams. I would invite everyone to go check out PFF's own Seth Galina's piece on PFF.com talking about this offense and the problems that they've had, largely because Lombardi, their offensive coordinator, is essentially asking Justin Herbert, who has truly one of the strongest arms in the entire league, to run an offense more set for 40-year-old Drew Brees.
Yeah, so when I look at it, I've seen some of the same things with Herbert. We've seen a lot of the targets, going underneath. I don't know how much of that has been coverage driven because early in the season they were hitting, more of the big plays. So I would be, and that's probably in the article. I'll have to go check it out. But yeah, as far as, looking at these guys from a fantasy perspective, Austin Eckler, I don't really need to talk a lot about it. It's not a great matchup against the Steelers, but what does Austin Eckler get that negates really any sort of matchup that we worry about? He gets a lot of receiving opportunities, so he's going to be fine. But if you look at him over the last few weeks, he has been a little down again. It makes you wonder, is Eckler dealing with an injury? But he's had finishes of 30, then he popped up to a 3, 25, and 19. Or maybe we just got spoiled early in the season when we got a 6, 8, 3, and a 1 all in a row. But Austin Eckler is still, in my top 5 backs for the week. I've got him actually ranked at number 5. And then if you look at Keenan Allen, wow, Keenan Allen is remember when everyone was worried about Keenan Allen? Ian, and they're
all the way 2 weeks ago.
It's all Mike Williams. It's all Mike Williams. No, it's not. 33%, 35%, 35%. What are those? Those are the target shares for Keenan Allen over the last 3 games. Guy is completely dominating, gets to work inside, gets the good matchups, one of the best route runners in the league, 75% open rate against single man coverage. That's freaking ridiculous. Don't even try to do that with Keenan Allen. Come on, defensive coordinators. What are you doing? He's just got to be sitting there thinking, it's almost like that. It's like that Peyton Manning, whenever Gruden ran the all out blitz, you got that old video. Are you serious, man? You serious? You just tried that against me? That has to be what Keenan Allen's thinking every week. As far as Mike Williams, actually, I've got homework in. I'm going to go watch every route from Mike Williams over the past few weeks versus what he looked like early in the season. Because the underlying data, I'm hearing some people say, oh, well, he's just hurt. He's just hurt. But when we look at the underlyings, like he's getting open. Like he's doing things like that you wouldn't think like a non-healthy player. He may not be 100%, but we have people play less than 100% all the time in the league. I still lean to the fact that, we've got a passing offense with a good young quarterback. They throw it in every single scenario. Mike Williams is probably going to be okay. Now, I do have a little bit of a doubt because Mike Williams is a player that historically, until this season, we have seen him be an underperformer, or it could just be the injury. So I'm going to try and take a closer look.
I don't know, though, Dwayne, because we've always seen him overperform relative to the targets he gets. This is a guy with a 1,000-yard year, with an 11 touchdown year.
That's true.
And he never had more than 90 targets before. So even if he is, I'm honestly surprised that he's still separating well. He's never been a big time separator. What he is a 6'4", 225-pound monster with top 5 draft capital that's largely dominated when given ample target opportunities. But when he's had, 16 total targets over his past 3 games, and you look at his last big blow-up game where he had 15 targets alone in that one, I just don't think the opportunities are there, and I think it goes down to the offense not even taking the shots downfield and being too content to dink and dunk it with Eckler and Keenan up and down the field.
But to be fair, his big production early in the season didn't come off of shots downfield either. They really came, more underneath. But I'm of the mindset that targets are earned, right? So a target itself is valuable in a way. So not all targets are the same, right? I'm talking receivers working down the field, having to get open against, multiple defenders in coverage, things like that. And so Williams you're right. Historically, even this season, his open rate against single man coverage has only been 30%. But Mike Williams is one of those players you talk about what is open, right? For him. So it's not so low that it's terrible. But this last week, it did kind of surprise me because he was actually, he beat single man coverage 60% of the time. And it was actually a pretty big sample size. That was 15 routes. And he only saw 5 targets. So it does make me, it's what is going on? Why are they not targeting him? If he is getting open, even if he's not, to your point, he's the kind of guy you can throw open. They were using him more in the short and intermediate passing game early this season. So it wasn't like he had to just be a deep field stretcher to really get his points. But I've got him at wide receiver 21 this week. It's not the greatest matchup whenever you look at it against the Steelers. So it's bottom 5 from a wide receiver strength of schedule. But again, this is an offense that we like. This is an offense that we want to be in on. So it's not something I'm going to let scare me too much. Keenan Allen, I've got at wide receiver 7 on the week. You guys heard the target share. There's really nothing else you need to hear. You need to hear about Keenan Allen. The dude just gets open, and Justin Herbert is in love with Keenan Allen right now. And I've got Herbert at number 8 on the week.
PFF Lily got restless. She is now joining the final game of the pod. Monday Night Football, Giants at Buccaneers, Tampa Bay sitting as 11-point favorites, game total at 49.5. Guess who's back? Saquon is back. Now, was not the best performance from Saquon as a rusher early on in the year. I brought up that stat about carries with at least 2 yards after contact. He is dead last in a 51 running back sample, but that really has been the Saquon experience. You look at his stats and he's got 15 carries for 20 yards. You look in the third quarter and then you look in the fourth quarter and he ripped off a 70-yard touchdown. So either way, Dwayne, the usage was there, which is what we are chasing. 80% snap rates in 3 of the first 4 games, basically after getting, just cautiously brought back into action. The first week of the year, he was back to his usual business, and he turned in RB9 and RB2 performances on 22 and 18 touches in his last 2 fully healthy games. So we know he's got the receiving chops, and it's honestly might not be this defense that we need to overly fear as long as Vita Vea is going to be sidelined with that knee injury. Cannot overstate how important he is to what Tampa Bay does in the middle of their defense. So you take away Vita, you give Saquon 20-plus touches, he should be in the overwhelming majority of fantasy lineups. Maybe Booker keeps things a little more split than usual for the first week back, but I don't know, man. Being able to come off that bye week, I do think we're going to see Saquon back to his usual 3-down role. I'd be hard-pressed to find too many lineups where you should not be starting him here, despite, again, a tough matchup, but once you take Vita Vea out of it, it really does become a lot more manageable. With the wide receivers, I hope it's Kadarius Toney. You hope it's Kadarius Toney. Does Jason Garrett care? I don't know. 7th in yards per route run in an 182-player sample. The only guys more efficient on a per-route basis, Deebo Samuel, Cordero Patterson, Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, Antonio Brown, and Jamar Chase. So because of this, Tony is tied for 99th, with just 34 targets on the season. Come on, Garrett. You had the bye week. Go get one of your best players of football, because before the bye, Colin Johnson had 38% of the snaps. Tony Slayton and Kenny Golladay, 55% each. So Sterling Shepard was working off the side in Monday's practice with a quad issue. It's looking like he might still be a week or two away. So, Dwain, I'm hopeful Tony gets the targets he deserves. Will he actually get them? I don't know. So until we see some sign that he's going to get featured, I'd be hard-pressed to rank him higher than, in that maybe 28 to 35 range. Interested in your Tony thoughts and Saquon, and then give me some Tampa Bay stuff. But I realize that at this point, pretty easy to just read at least what's going on.
I struggle to even get Tony that high unless we do know Shepard's going to be out, right? If Shepard's going to be out, then I think
if Shepard's in, then we cannot get him that high. Absolutely.
Right. So so we'll have to wait and see. But I think if Shepard's out, he's somewhere in that range. I prefer putting him more towards the low end, right, of the wide receiver threes, for the week. But if we get something with Shepard's out, he can jump up a little bit. If Shepard plays, like right now, I've got Tony down, like my wide receiver 45-ish. He's right around there. So he's like around a lot of guys that have talent, right? Elijah Moore, Kadarius Toney, Michael Gallup, but, they're sharing. They're sharing this workload. So that's just, these are players we know can all get it done. We'd like to see them get more work. Bateman, Ayuk, all in the same tier. So it's kind of that same mold. As far as the Bucs go, there's really not a ton to hit here. We know Tom Brady had a bad week last week. But guess what? You don't care. I don't care. He has a great matchup this week against the Giants. I expect him to completely shred them. They are favorites, but it doesn't matter. They're 11 points favored because Brady throws the ball in every single situation well above the league average. If he's trailing, doesn't care. If it's a close game, doesn't care. If he's leading, does not care. Pedal to the freaking metal. Brady's going for all the records. Does not care about anyone else except TB12 and getting his team, back to the Super Bowl. So I expect to see that be the same. I do like Leonard Fournette this week, though, Ian. What I liked about Fournette last week is they gave the long down and distance and the 2-minute offense back to Gio Bernard, but kind of like it's almost like an under-the-table handshake. Hey, we're going to do this to you, Lenny, but guess what? We're going to use a little bit more in passing work on first and second down, and we're only going to give Rojo one snap. So it's actually going to be okay. You're still going to get your work, so you don't have to freak out, take your helmet off, like try to bash it across someone's head like you did a few years ago, and you ruined Dwayne's DFS slate. It was going to be perfectness. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that Dwain McFarland guy. He's just negative, trying to bring you down in your life. We got you, Fournette. So got him at number 11 right now, Ian. Mike Evans, number 11 receiver. That's just a coincidence. And number 14 right now is Chris Godwin on the week. If we do get Antonio Brown back, which we don't know yet, it really sounds like we may not again. It's just he's just starting off the week as questionable. We'll have to wait and get more information. If we do, once we do eventually get Antonio Brown, back, then we have to drop these receivers down a little bit. As long as he is out, right, they're borderline wide receiver 1, right there, high-end wide receiver 2s every week. Once you get Brown back, I have to bump these two down more like a mid wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 2, and Antonio Brown really becomes like a high-end wide receiver 3 as soon as he returns. We'll also have to wait and see what's going to happen with Gronkowski. We did get him back, before the bye. He was only able to play a few snaps before he hurt his back. And last week we had him out again, starting off the week as questionable. For now, I don't have him in the ranks. Cameron Brate did play like 80% of the routes last week, so he could be a sneaky low-end tight end streamer, but it's hard to trust. Like we kind of saw that early in the season. We're like, we could use Brate, and then like all of a sudden he'd be down at 50 or 40% of the routes. So not a player that we can really just wrap our arms around and like fully embrace, but something we'll keep an eye on as the week goes and we figure out what's going to happen with these injuries.
Yeah, man, that Fournette, for him to finish RB14 against a studly defensive line that we knew was going to make running the ball tough. And then for the Buccaneers to fall behind as much as they did, that's worst case scenario for Fournette. And he finished as the RB14. Goes to show you what his new role is like in 2021, where Rojo's a non-factor and Giovanni Bernard really isn't stealing anywhere near as much target share as a lot of us maybe thought he would back in August. People, hope you enjoyed this special 2 hours and 30 minutes edition of the
Special is that what we're going
PFF
with?
Fantasy Football Podcast. We are going with special, and we have another special deal. You can get 25% off any PFF subscription if you use code FANTASY. Look at that transition, Dwayne. That's why they pay me the medium bucks. Grades and data are live for every
You're
single
professional.
player who logged a snap last week. Go check out the highest graded players from week 10. Dwayne's utilization report, my wide receiver, cornerback breakdowns, running back breakdown. All of our locked article content can be yours with a PFF subscription. Again, use promo code FANTASY for 25% off that sub. All the rankings Dwayne and I mentioned throughout here will be updated throughout the week, as will they for the rest of our fantasy crew. Also, everyone, Manscaped just launched new products, including their all-new Ultra Premium Body Wash and a 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner. It's time to give yourself or someone who needs it the gift of beautiful skin, hair, and balls this holiday season. Go to Manscaped and use code PFF for 25% off plus free shipping. Again, 20% off and free shipping with the code PFF at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use promo code PFF. And also, football fans, who's ready to score some free bets? Now you can when you bet on any NFL game this week with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. New customers who bet just $1 on either team to score can win $100 in free bets. When a team scores, you score. Download DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code PFF. Bet $1 on either team to score and win $100 in free bets. If they score, you score. Promo code PFF this week at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older. New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit, $1 wager, one per customer. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. That's going to wrap up this special edition of the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Dwayne, anything else that you want to get off your chest that you haven't had a chance to already?
No, I don't think I have any more words left, Ian. Do you?
No, and I'm sorry, YouTubers. I know I've been blowing my nose and coughing this whole damn podcast. Still, hurt not injured. Still working my way back up to 100%, but I know that's probably annoying to look at. So hopefully the voice isn't pissing off too many people. But if it is, you can just blame your life problems on me. That's fine. I got a thick skin. So for Dwayne, I'm Ian. Thank you as always for tuning in. Until next time, take care, everybody.